2012. We have the roll call, please. Carrie or Jackie?
Here.
Commissioner Forrest. Here.
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 Here. Here. Quorum is present, and we can proceed with the meeting. First item is approval of the meeting agenda. You have that before you. I note that during Chair and Commission member comments, Kevin will be talking about some work plan issues, and at some point I would like to have a little bit of discussion concerning the materials that were submitted with the last meeting on sidewalls or side yards and retaining walls along the side there, so we can have a little bit of discussion about that. There are other items to be added to the agenda. Okay, hearing none, I'll ask for approval of the meeting agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The agenda is approved. The next is approval of the consent agenda. First item there is minutes of the regular meeting for June 13th. Are there any corrections or comments on the meetings, the minutes? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Or did you have a comment, Commissioner?
Minutes.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved. Is there a second? Second. Any other discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes of the June 13th meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Excuse me. The next item on the consent agenda is community comment. This is an opportunity for the members of the public to address the Commission on any items or new items that has not been heard or considered in the last 30 days by the Commission, or which are not presently slated for future consideration. So if it's about items that are going to be on the agenda tonight, and you pretty much, by your presence, I think, know what's going to be on the agenda tonight, let's not have any comments about that, because we'll take those comments during the public hearing. But if anyone has comments on any other topic that might be of interest to the Commission or to the public, we'd be most happy to hear from you now. And if you would come to the podium and identify yourself and give us your comments, we'd be glad to hear you. Are there any comments from the public? Okay, hearing none, we will move on. Thank you. The first item on the agenda, then, is public hearings, comprehensive plan amendment, preliminary development plan, and rezoning from Planned Office District 1 to Planned Unit Development for Mountain Development Company, 6500 France Avenue and 4005 West 65th Street. Planner Teague.
Thank you, Chair Grable, members of the Commission. Before you is a redevelopment proposal at the addresses that you previously mentioned. I believe the Planning Commission is familiar with this. We've reviewed a development on this site a couple of times, a sketch plan review and a preliminary rezoning request. The property is located kitty corner from the Fairview Southdale Hospital. A couple of months ago, the Planning Commission considered development just at the 6500 France site. The graphic on the screen before you is the plan that was considered by the Planning Commission and recommended for denial. It was a 5-story, 69,000 square foot building just on that site. And amongst other reasons, primarily the Commission felt it was too much for the site. We were looking for some podium heights and potentially, if possible, incorporate the site to the west. So given those comments, the applicant elected not to go forward with this plan to the City Council. they have acquired that property to the west and have reconfigured the plans based on some of your comments the last time we reviewed this. So again, they have incorporated that site to the west in the plans that are before you this evening. So both of these properties are currently zoned POD office, POD 1. The site is guided for regional medical uses in the comprehensive plan, and that's the use that is proposed here this evening. Of note, in the comprehensive plan, the regional medical district contemplates a floor area ratio of 1. Under the current POD office zoning district, it's 0.5. So the comprehensive plan has contemplated essentially doubling the density on the site. The comprehensive plan also has a maximum height of 4 stories and suggests a podium height of 2 stories, as suggested on the screen here. The site is, as we've discussed before, located within a potential area of change. The City Council haven't reviewed the sketch plan review or, again, that preliminary development plan. Ultimately, they'll have to make a determination whether a small area plan is needed. So the graphic on the screen here, these are the existing buildings at the 6500 site, the Milovitz building, and then this is that office building to the west. So both of those buildings would be removed, and the applicant is proposing a 2-phase development here. The ultimate build-out is what you see on the screen. It would be a 6-story building, 81 feet tall, a little over 102,000 square feet. It would be, again, a 2-phase development. The first phase would be 4 stories, so just removing the top 2 levels, with a 3-ramp or 3-level parking ramp. The ultimate build-out would include a 5-level ramp, and that is detached. So some of the changes from the previous plan, they are including the podium height. It would be a 2-story. It would bump out about 10 feet, both on 65th and on France. Some of the elements that have changed from the previous, you can see the main entrance to the building was at the corner of 65th and France. That's around the corner now. That element has been lost. And there's also no openings to the street indicated within the plan here. And I think that was one of the things that we talked about, is we'd like to see those store openings to open up to the street. I believe the closest entrance here that's suggested is located right here. So just to quickly show you some other angles of the project, and the applicant will go into this in more detail with their presentation. So this is essentially the main entrance that faces 65th. You see the detached parking ramp. A look from the west, from the apartments to the west. The applicant is suggesting some green roofs over the podium height, as you can see there. This is a street level, so you've got the curb. There's about 7-foot separation into the 5-foot green space. There would be a 10-foot sidewalk and another 5 feet to the podium height. So there would be a 25-foot setback that's proposed both on France and on 65th. And the graphic here that you see is for the 4-story building. So you can envision at ultimate build-out there would be another 2 stories straight up. The applicant has a graphic that will show that as part of their presentation. So what we're looking at now is some of the first phase, what the building would look like with just 4 stories and the 3-level parking ramp. Again, you see the green roofs. So this is a look at the site plan. They're proposing a right turn exit only. The loading zone would be located right here. They work to try to get that as far away from the point of France to the south as possible to try to minimize impacts there. In and out, primary access off of 65th. Again, you see the 25-foot setback from France, 25-foot setback to 65th Street, with the bulk of the building having a 35-foot setback. So this is a two-step development review process. This is the first step before the Planning Commission. It is a comprehensive plan amendment that would allow 6 stories here and 81 feet high. Again, it's a 4-story maximum currently today, so that requires 4 votes of the City Council, and preliminary rezoning and preliminary development plan. Then if that's approved by the City Council, they would then come back for final rezoning and then a final development plan. And they are requesting a PUD in this instance, so we would take a look at the ordinance amendment that would establish this PUD. A draft of that ordinance was included in your packet. So again, the request before the Planning Commission is the comprehensive plan amendment, the preliminary rezoning, and the preliminary development plan. So just quickly looking at with all PUDs, we start with the compliance table with the existing zoning. And you'll note there's a number of variances that are requested here or would be requested under the traditional zoning, similar to the Twin City Orthopedics building. The required setbacks are based on the height of the structure. So again, they're bringing the building up close to the street and providing the parking in back. Again, the 4-story height, that would be a variance. There would be a building coverage variance, slightly over the 30% that's required. Floor area ratio, this is highlighted here under the current zoning again, 0.5 is required. However, it is guided for regional medical, and this would be consistent with that zoning district. In terms of overstory trees, 34 are required. They're proposing nearly double that with 62 and a large number of understory trees. Again, that would be examined much closer as part of Phase 2. In regard to parking, ultimate build-out, they would provide enough parking spaces based on the code. However, in the first phase, they would be slightly short. 374 spaces are required based on code, and they would be providing 311. A parking study was done by WSB, a traffic study as well, and they have concluded that the 311 would suffice to meet their needs for Phase 1. We would likely do some type of a proof of parking agreement should the project be approved to ensure those stalls be constructed if they are needed. Chuck Rickard is here from WSB if we have any questions on the parking and traffic study. So the primary issues before the Planning Commission is the proposed comprehensive plan amendment to allow the greater height reasonable for the site, and is the rezoning to PUD appropriate? So first, in regard to the proposed height, staff does believe that it is reasonable. The proposed height of the building is consistent with heights in the area. The Fairview Southdale Hospital is up to 8 stories and 124 feet tall. The Southdale Medical Center is a 6-story building, 92 feet tall. We've got the Southdale Office Center, 6 and 7 stories, nearly 100 feet tall. And the Point of France right next door is 13 stories. So the proposed 6 stories is in keeping with adjacent buildings in the area. Again, they are providing the podium height to lessen that impact of the height at the street level. And the proposed FAR is consistent with the regional medical district. The second is the PUD appropriate. And again, staff believes that it does. The use is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The regional medical proposed is the proposed use. It's a more efficient use of the property. Again, they're bringing the building up close to the street, providing the pedestrian connections along the street. One thing I didn't condition in the staff report is in regard to those front doors facing the street. So we may want to require that condition that the retail on the main level provides front door entrances toward France and toward 65th. So you may want to consider that as you're considering the project. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the comp plan amendment and the preliminary rezoning subject to the conditions and findings that are outlined in the staff report. with that, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Kerry. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Staunton?
Carrie, can you put up the table again, the chart that has the kind of compliance figures?
Jordan,
Froze
it
you,
seems to
sorry.
be frozen. Sorry.
Just give it a kick. Ooh, that's a bad screen.
Right about now, Mr. Michaels is sitting there going, boy, I'm glad that happened to Carrie instead of me. Okay.
I could put the table on the overhead, yeah.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's good. I can just ask off this. So, you've done the comparison to the POD1, but my question is, with some of these, if it were the regional medical zoning, would that change any of these? Because I noticed regional medical, the setbacks are 25 and 35 feet, but that also has the exception for building height, so is it the same for the setbacks in regional medical?
It is. It's based on the height. So the only change would be the floor area ratio. This would be compliant with the regional medical district. All of the others,
Or basically the same,
Would be the same.
requirements?
right?
And in terms of the 311 stalls, so our ordinance in Phase 1 would require, you said, 374? Is that
Correct.
right? So would you just be proposing that we do a proof of,
I would, yeah.
Parking
For
agreement.
Phase 1, we'd have a
Okay.
proof of parking agreement that should that second phase never be built, but parking becomes a problem, they would have to add a level
Sure.
to the parking ramp.
okay, thank you.
Other questions of staff? Karen, I have a question. Commissioner Potts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we get a little more description about the traffic study that was done? If that was based on full build-out, there were some, just a brief overview level of service where the worst conditions occur to help decipher the facts and figures in the report.
Sure, I would invite Chuck to come and speak to those.
Members of the commission. We did the original traffic study back, with the original development of just the one site. We then re-looked at the same intersections. Now, the one big difference between the original traffic study and this one was the accesses into the site. The original plan just had the one access, one full movement access. This has two full movement accesses off of 65th and that right out access onto France Avenue. So the traffic coming in and out of the site got diluted a little bit amongst those accesses a little bit. So the levels of service at all those access points, operated fine. Similar to the other study, we did have some of the maximum queues, that queues that would happen, once in an hour, for a very short period of time that would back up, between the access points. But that would happen, again, at full build. All these were looking at the full build condition, not the phase. The traffic study, I didn't look at the Phase 1, just the Phase 1 alone. I just assumed the full build of everything for the Phase 1. The parking, I looked at the phasing, but for the traffic study, I did not look at that full build. So the levels of service of those intersections, there's some movements that are at D, but the overall intersections were at acceptable, season better. Did that clarify, or do you want me to go into a little bit more detail about that?
I guess just one clarification question. Do you take into account all the traffic in the Fairview Southdale ramp to the north as
Yes.
well when looking at the movements
Yes.
in combination?
Yep, yeah, all the accesses we looked at, including, now those accesses, that second access, the furthest one to the west, would actually line up very close to that other intersection. So we did take into account those movements in and out at both those. The center left turn lane helps that operation, fairly significantly through the corridor. So getting those left turn movements out of that through lane of traffic was very helpful.
Thank you.
Commissioner Forrest?
I also have a question for Mr. Rickard. What would trigger signal improvements? We say that we would have the developer, owner, whoever, contribute to any signal improvements that might be needed in the future. So we're already at level D for a level of service. At what, in your mind or professional opinion, would trigger those needed improvements?
Traffic signal improvements. Primarily, the traffic signal improvements would be timing, and we'd be working with the county on the timing improvements at the intersection. So it wouldn't be, adding a lane or anything like that. So we did look at, again, full build out of this site and that projected background traffic growth of the area. There's capacity on France with the 3 lanes, primarily through this area, and on 65th, it's fairly built, especially now looking at both of these sites. It's fairly built out, along 65th, so you're not going to be adding a ton more traffic on 65th, although we did look at that additional growth. There may be some through traffic, and again, we included that as part of our analysis also. So to answer your question as far as what would trigger it, again, it would be the traffic, delays getting back past some of these driveways, things like that would cause some of that, need for timing improvements. And it would be adding additional time to the side street, the 65th and the hospital access primarily.
Other questions for Mr. Rickard? Thank you. Stick around. There may be more.
I'll be here.
Carrie, I have a question about the procedure here. The proposal is for essentially a 6-story building with a first phase at 4. So I assume that the action that would be proposed, and if it were to be adopted, would be for the full 6 stories, regardless of the fact that they intend to do a 4-story to begin with. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So there's no comeback if there's no comeback to say they got to move from the 4 to the 6 within any particular period of time or anything like that.
Correct. You're considering a comprehensive plan amendment to allow the 6 stories and the 81 feet in height.
So at the time, if it was approved, and nothing's been approved yet, but I'm just asking the question so we all understand what the procedure is.
Right.
If it's approved and they build 4, then 2 years from now or 3 years from now or next year from now, they decide to add the additional 2. There's no additional action that's needed at that time. Is that correct?
It would only be a site plan review. Essentially, it would be allowed under the PUD ordinance to go up to that height, but there would be a site plan review required. Okay. But it's simply just essentially a checklist to make sure there's enough landscaping and parking, and so it would just be site plan review at that time.
Okay. Other questions of staff? Commissioner Staunton?
Just picking up on that, is the site plan review administrative, or does that come through the Planning Commission and the Council?
That comes before the Planning Commission and Council.
Okay. And then I assume there'd be a separate building permit as well, but that doesn't come through us.
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions of staff? Okay, thank you. Would the proponent care to make a presentation?
It's a pleasure to be before you this evening Chairman Griebel, members of the Planning Commission. It's an interesting new project that we have before you tonight. We're very excited about it. We've worked hard based on the comments that you had last April. So we'd like to review that few comments right now. Ed Farr then will spend about 10 minutes and go through the project, and then I'll wrap it up with a few comments. So we do believe that the new multi-phase plan will be an outstanding addition to our regional medical area, and it will serve the entire community. Our development team will be Ed Farr of Ed Farr Architects, Mark Roush of Alliant Engineering, Luigi Bernardi of Aurora Investments, and then we have Stacy Gallup here this evening to speak on behalf of the 6500 France ownership, and then Peter Pastorino as an owner of the 405 building ownership. We are in agreement with the staff report in its entirety. We do have one clarification that Ed Farr will bring up for your opinion as he gets into his presentation. On June 14th, we did have a third meeting with the Point of France group, and we spent about an hour and a half and went through the materials that you are seeing this evening. This is a highly visible commercial corner. It has been said that this area of France Avenue is the gateway to the Southdale area. The land has been very expensive as we acquired an additional site to the west. And with these types of redevelopment, the older existing buildings tend to be pretty similar to the land value. So when we look at this redevelopment, it does become difficult to maintain specific code items. So we feel that the PUD process that we're requesting this evening should be appropriate for this site. We have made major compromises in our plan to be compatible with the neighborhood and still have an economically feasible project. The additional land did allow us to provide more site circulation and give us a little bit more setback around all four sides of the project. As Mr. Teague mentioned, we are within the 1.0 floor area ratio of 102,000 feet for the project. For us to achieve the goals of the project, we were able to provide the additional green space. Our prior application was a 1.29 floor area ratio. We were able to get that down to 1.0, which does drive the 102,000 square feet for the building, which equals that land size. To achieve that land floor area ratio in building, we do need to go up 6 levels. We do feel that the neighborhood is sensitive to that, but based on the aesthetics of the building and the additional requirements and incentives that we're providing around the perimeter of the building, we do feel it's justified. The building is relatively modest in size. Each floor is only 15,000 square feet. The 6363 France building on the north side of the hospital has about the same floor plate on each of those 6 levels. So that'll give you a perspective on the size of that building. It is a special corner. We feel that the architecture that we're providing does give us an enhanced gateway feel, and we're looking forward to going through in detail the rest of the architectural plans with you this evening. So I'd like to introduce Ed Farr, and he will go through a few more details and answer any questions that you do have. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. My name is Ed Farr with Edward Farr Architects, 7710 Golden Triangle Drive, Eden Prairie 55346. As Steve mentioned, we are all thrilled to be back here with this superior change to our development application here. We're thrilled that the landowner was able to find more land for us and direct comments that we received from you folks last time, and as an architect that offered many more site planning opportunities and better solutions. And that's what I believe, staff found out also in their recommendation for approval for our site plan. So again, we're just thrilled with all this. I'm going to go through my slides relatively quickly. Carrie mentioned a number of things that I was going to, so I'll try and be as brief as I can, and yet cover the context of our submittal for those of which may be in the audience that hasn't heard yet. These are the existing condition photographs. The 6500 building was originally depicted on our previous application on the right-hand side, those photographs. The property, the 4005 building is shown on the left here, which is a modest two-story brick building with surface parking, and that's the new site that we are also taking over to the west. I may come back to this later. This was our original submittal, a small site plan of this showing what possibly could have expanded on there to the west, but of course we aren't proposing that right now. I'm going to jump right to our new site plan. And by keeping in mind we had a smaller footprint before and we had a parking deck squeezed in there with a 1.0 FAR. We reduced that from our last application down to from 1.29, as Steve mentioned. We're able to stack these floors and make a slightly larger footprint than we had before, and keeping the building height only to 6 stories instead of doubling the height of our last proposal, which was a 5-story building, which could have gone to 10. So we wanted to keep the building low slung from that respect. From a site circulation standpoint, you can see that off of 65th Street, we are now enjoying a wonderful circulation pattern to get the cars off of 65th Street, be able to deliver the patient right to the front door by someone who's driving them there so they can get out and walk a very short walk to the elevators to get in. And then while still off the public way, that driver can then go right into the parking deck themselves, it's a paid parking deck, without having to take take the patient along with them and have the patient make that walk to the medical office building. So we have a vastly superior circulation plan for our customers. For our services, as Carrie mentioned, of course, we have now a dedicated place for the loading zone, which is tucked in very nicely between our medical office building and the parking structure. We don't anticipate a lot of loading, of course. The loading doors will be simple swing doors, not overhead doors or anything like that. And this will be a very low-key loading area. We have 3 points of egress from the site now instead of just one. As the gentleman from WSB mentioned, it assists in dispersing the outbound traffic. We have the exits at the northwest corner and in the middle of the entrance, as I pointed out, in 65th Street, as well as a right out only on France Avenue. There's no inbound on France, of course, but we, of course, want to take advantage of that traffic dispersal to as many points around as possible to limit any congestion. There are 2 entrance points, both of them off of 65th, like I said, and with the city engineer's comments in his memo, he recommended a small median separating inbound and outbound here, which we are gladly to comply with. We have increased setbacks around our site. Specifically along France Avenue, we have that 25-foot building setback, both along France and 65th for the medical office building, increasing to 35 feet up above podium level. As Carrie mentioned, that separation in our lower building floor plan, the 25-foot setback up to the 35 is taken up with a green roof that will appreciate from ground level as well. So we have that 35-foot setback. Also, the distance to our south property line from the medical office building has grown up to 30 feet. So we have that aisleway on the south there, and this 30-foot setback is significantly greater than it was in our last proposal. As a matter of reference, the Point of France building to the south of this site plan, I don't know if you can see my cursor here go up and down on your screen. The Point of France building is just south of my cursor waving there. That would be the eastern edge of that building, and the western edge of the Point of France would be around where my cursor is waving right now. This would be the Phase 1 four-story development entrance off of 65th Street. Carrie mentioned that we've relocated our main entry feature that you saw previously at the corner, of course, of 65th and France before, where the entrance was. But of course, now it's here because this is our visitor entry and our main point of drop-off. I'm showing a flagpole right here. There's been a dialogue about sculpture potentially in this entrance circle to enhance the visual for the community. And turning just slightly to the right, this is the entrance to the parking garage. You'll notice that it's very low slung. It's a one-story structure at this point in time. We're burying our first level of our parking structure below grade fully. So there's no visual impact for that first level. The second level, of course, looks like this. The third level, which we're putting on, also doesn't have a roof, so you can't tell that it's basically two levels of structure because it's a parking ramp, doesn't have a roof. So it looks like a one-story building. I'll come back to what I want to talk about with the parking here on the staff report in a moment. The same two images with the Phase 2. This is our ultimate build at 6 stories for the medical office building, and ultimate build for the parking garage at its 5 levels. So this is 2 increased levels above and beyond the slide I showed just a moment ago. It should be noted that we are not sure whether or not the Phase 2 medical office building development will require both additional levels of the parking deck to be constructed. We'll assess what kind of a tenant mix we have when we build those 2 additional medical office building floors and then construct 1 or 2 additional levels to the parking structure, not necessarily both of these. I've shown this for maximum visual impact here for your approval tonight, but the parking deck may be 3, 4, or 5 levels. Commissioner Staunton asked a question to staff earlier about the proof of parking, and of course we're going to be using the parking levels as proof of parking as we grow, but as another buffer that we have at our disposal, I have currently striped our parking deck with 9-foot wide stalls, a little bit more generous than the code minimum 8'6", so we can always increase the number of stalls as needed to stripe down to 8'6" and gain a little bit more stalls if we find ourselves on the edge. So we have a little buffer one way or the other. The trees have been stripped away in this view. This is that northeast corner, France and 65th. Strip the trees away just so you can see what's going on here with the facade, this podium feature, 2 stories high, stepping back to the 35-foot setback. This is during Phase 1 construction with the 4-story building. You can see our greenery here with our grasses, savanna grasses growing on our green roof facing both towards France Avenue and 65th. And this is that same view after Phase 2. I replanted the existing trees along France that exist now. The night view that you saw, this is Phase 1. Again, I've stripped the trees away along the building just to show you the building architecture and how the podium effect works with that street frontage. As I mentioned before, on our last application, the actual corner itself of 65th and France, we're going to be working with the city engineer who had explained to us your plans as a city to enhance certain pedestrian crossings. This is one of them. And so we're proposing those lighted bollards at the corner to provide safety for the pedestrians as well as some nighttime illumination. Generous plaza there at the corner to just ease in the circulation for pedestrians, as well as the enhanced landscaping, which I'm going to go in now. You heard us talk about that under previous applications. This is the graphic that is new to what Carrie suggested before, our cross-section through the site looking southbound on France that shows both the 4-story Phase 1 and then ghosted in as the 6-story Phase 2 building on top, and how that podium effect works. Of course, this setback here allows sunlight and air for just the breathability of the street, while at the same time accomplishing your goal of bringing the building towards the street, which is a goal of your comprehensive plan, to be street friendly. From pedestrian way, similar to our last application, we have the existing honey locust trees remaining now. We do not have a basement below this medical office building, which differs from our last submittal, so we don't have to excavate and tear off those roots. So we're going to retain the honey locust along France Avenue and 65th Street. That was the difference between the last proposal, as we were cutting down on our basement and we couldn't save those roots. We still have the elaborate, colorful plantings along the street. And of course, this is that close-up view of our podium level transition where we have our green roof and a decorative railing, which will be very nice as you walk along, as well as the views from that third floor window. Tangletown Gardens, we had introduced them before. We're not going to make that same presentation tonight, to be brief, but they excel in street front plantings, and we will still be engaging them to plant along 65th and France Avenue for some just really, really wonderful plantings as you drive along. They will be stunning, as these pictures depict. And then again, stripping away the trees, this is that effect Carrie mentioned before, just with the plantings in the foreground along France Avenue, the green strip buffer for snow storage for your snow plows as they come by. The pedestrian way is separated from the curb so that can be handled easily without fear of snowplow or cars splashing up on the pedestrians. So we have nice, generous gap there for safety and cleanliness. And then the architectural wall lighting along here to enhance the pedestrian experience as well. Here's a view eastbound 65th as you're approaching the development from the west, as though you may have come off the Crosstown Expressway. You're just passing the Twin City Orthopedic Building on your left and passing the apartment building on your right. And you'll notice, this is a phase one, but you'll notice how low slung our parking structure is. There are some existing trees we're retaining along the boulevard that are in the foreground of the picture, as well as our new plantings. And this is leading up to what we wanted to talk about. One of staff's recommendations for conditions of approval is that we consider a dark lined cornice on top of the parking structure in lieu of my lighter colored color scheme here for the parking deck. You may recall that in the last application where we had a smaller site, we had a building of X number of stories, and our parking deck was also that same X number of stories. They married up next to each other, and the buildings were laterally compatible across there. And so there was an architectural effort to carry lines and proportions across from building to building. This site does not lay up this way at all. I've retained the conventional architectural treatment of the medical office building with a base, a shaft out of that brick, and then a cornice top. The parking deck, however, because it's wider, can be lower slung. It's lower to the ground. It only relates to the base of the medical office building. There was no attempt, and I don't think there ought to be an attempt, to put a dark cornice line on top of the parking structure to give it a top per se. It's disproportionate to the top of the medical office building, and again breaks down that relationship that I'm trying to achieve, which is to have the parking deck lightness on its feet relate to the base of the building where it's light. So I'm going to, with that in mind, just carry that through here. Here is that, again, phase two, if we were to build those other two levels. Again, this height of the parking structure is relative more to the base of the medical office building than it is the top cornice of the medical office building. The view from, like the pond in the southwest corner of our property, looking to the north and northeast, we're planting new coniferous trees, staggered, of course, for screening for the Point of France residents. And we have an existing tree buffer along that line as well that will retain itself. Again, note the shortness of the parking deck. This is a phase one view, and here's a phase two view if it was to be all levels provided there. We've tried to break up the facade, and you'll notice that all openings are covered with dark bronze louvers, very similar to the technique that the orthopedics building did across the street, but to the point of not having any visibility into those intermediate levels facing any residential zones or the public way. We have these louvers facing north, 65th Street, west to the apartments, and south to the Point of France people. Okay? These elevations depict the four-story phase one building. The top row is with the trees and we've been asked to show them with the trees peeled away just so you can see the architecture at the bottom here. And I'd like to point out to you a similar story for the residents' knowledge as well as reference for yourself. This flagpole on the right-hand side is not a proposed flagpole by us, but rather that's the existing flagpole in front of the Milovitz building at 6,500. And that's the actual height of it. We surveyed that. It's approximately 62 feet. And for a matter of reference, then, that our Phase 1 building height is shorter than the flagpole. I've purposely undersized some of these tree graphics on top, which you'll see in a minute, for the purpose of seeing the building. But in moving to my next slide, here is the actual photograph that I took out of the 4th floor Pointe-à-France condominiums looking to the north. And while this was done in the winter, of course, the leaves aren't on their trees, but you can see the row of trees here in the photograph. They're rather high. They're higher than the vista out to the hospital parking deck in the background. And if I can hover my mouse right here, here's the top of the flagpole. And the top of the flagpole is about even with the tree line. Again, that's at about the 62-foot level. So the takeaway here is that our Phase 1 building will be below their tree line, and relative to this, that flagpole, be a very low impact to people that are on these lower floors, as well as the people that are on the upper floors will look right over the top of that. So that was an important finding. Here are the 6-story Phase 2 elevations. And again, just for reference purposes, I put that same flagpole in the lower right-hand corner. And you'll see how the building now goes up another story, just 1 story taller than that flagpole. So the net effect here, again, the takeaway on this is that our building goes above the tree line at Pointe-à-France only for 1 story. And we think that's really good, considering we're putting up a 6-story building here. The existing screening that's already in place as a buffer between our 2 properties, I think we'll be doing a tremendous job. I'm going to stop there and open it up for questions, or if Steve has anything more to say. Otherwise, here's our night view again, and we are very happy to be here. I do have samples of the brick. I showed them to you last time. If you'd like me to show them to you again or to the audience, I'd be more than happy to do that, and other trim materials.
I would like to, just if I could. I'd like to see the brick.
Brick, yes, you'd like to see the brick. Okay.
Make your work.
Try and put these in proportion to what the building has. Our brick number 1 is our field brick that goes from, I believe it's about floor 2.5 on up to consume most of the facade, the shaft of the building per se. Trim work is the darker gray brick, and then our base is a very light colored brick, similar to a limestone color. It'll have some activity in it and some texture, which is down at the touchable, viewable human level. And so you can see how the materials stack there a little bit with the lighter base, the orange iron spot. This is a beautiful iron spot brick. Thank you again. I'm sorry. The iron spot brick is on the shaft of the building, and that has some beautiful sun reflections as the day goes by. And the gray is the trim work around the windows, and the lighter colored brick has a lot of texture to it right at that pedestrian level. The matching architectural precast to the brick, this top half, which would be used as trim on the office building and on the parking structure. and the top of the building with that dark cornice line is a removable EFS product. We're planning on putting that on the Phase 1 top as a cornice, removing that, and if we can't reuse it, we'll rebuild it on top of Phase 2.
What's the module size for that brick? Is it face brick, or what is that? What are you putting
It's
on?
all utility size, 4 by 4 by
Utilities.
12.
Okay. Just to clarify, the precast, that's the parking structure, not the building?
The precast is the parking structure, that's correct. We do have some trim work of the precast on the building as well. If I could walk over. The vertical columns in the corner and along the top are the architectural precast. We're putting brick that thin just from a constructability standpoint. We'd rather have it out of precast concrete. But the bulk of the base is the brick.
Okay.
Commissioner Scherer?
I just want to clarify, I'm a great fan of louvers on parking ramps. Did I understand you to say that you have now added them on the 3 sides that would be exposed?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Further questions of Mr. Hart? Mr. Michael?
Chairman Grebo, members of the Planning Commission, at our last presentation, you asked for some community benefits of the project. That question was raised twice. Within your packet and application, I provided a 4-page narrative of about 18 items. I would be willing to highlight 2 or 3 of those items if you like. I know we've exceeded our 20 minutes, but that would be up to you if you'd like me to highlight several of those items.
Excuse me, which were those items again?
It's titled Highlights of Specific Community Benefits for the Project, such as employment. The buildings will generate about 100 new jobs within the community by retaining the Milovitz law firm and also the law firm that is in the 4005 building. It does discuss some pedestrian features that we're doing within the building. If you like, I could highlight a couple without being redundant to other comments that have been made this evening. It's up to you.
Please.
The green building initiatives have been very popular today. We feel those for the long-term benefit of the project are in our interest as well as the community's interest, so we will be doing specific green building initiatives during our design, certainly during our construction phase, and then also during the long-term operations for the clinics. Each of the clinics have patients that are very sensitive to this issue also, so we've actually dedicated some manpower to make sure that we're sensitive to those green building initiatives. Part of that will be ongoing seminars providing new technology for the clinics. The key there will be working with them to reduce their consumption, reuse materials, and also recycle waste. The benefit there to the building will be reduced operating expenses and then just general good stewardship with our resources. The key to our proof of parking that we've talked about would be a strong initiative towards alternative transportation. And I've given you 4 specific initiatives we will be doing. We will be designating premium parking stalls for what we call smart cars or very reduced size vehicles. We'll be making an enclosed area for scooters, motorcycles, and bicycle parking that's well lit, secure, and air tempered. There's a trend going on for bicycles where you can actually calculate your carbon footprint through a monitoring system called ZAP. I gave you a outline of how that product works. It's very specific, and for people that enjoy riding their bicycles, they get real satisfaction knowing that they are making a difference. The Our Car business, they're up to about 34 stations within our metro area. We believe that they'll be able to establish one at this site because of the quality bus transportation. We've got about 7 MTC lines going in and around Southdale. People that ride the bus then can rent these vehicles on an hourly basis. The benefit there will be a lower number of cars going into our ramp, so we don't have to build as much infrastructure for that ramp. Another key quality to the new project is our water quality and stormwater management. The current buildings have a certain hard surface area. Our new project will have about 4,000 square feet less hard surface. That hard surface area is in the middle of our site, so when we've reduced it, we're able to take that additional grass area and put it around the perimeter of the project so everyone can enjoy it. We feel that's very important. Also, the green roofs help us in our stormwater management also. The 2 current owners of the project, of the older buildings, will be speaking on redevelopment. These buildings have been on the sites there since the early 60s, and it is time for redevelopment on those properties. Another fun point of the project will be at our turnaround area. We've got a spot that will have a unique placement, highly visible for art. We're going to commission an art-type person to create a sculpture, and we'll have a special commissioning for that. We feel that's important for the community as we look at some of our other high-profile buildings within the community. Art is always unique and interesting, and we've got a very good place for that. My final comment here on our initial presentation, we appreciate so much the time you spent on this. I realize this is our 3rd time before you. The plan we've got before you is for 102,000 square feet. It's very important that we're able to achieve that square footage because of the land price of the 2 parcels we are purchasing. Market rents do set our overall budget. Our rents that we're projecting are about 20% higher than some of the other buildings in the area to be able to absorb some of this land cost. So as you review the project, we appreciate you honoring our request to try and achieve that 102,000 square foot project. We are here for questions, and we'll answer to our best of our ability any of your concerns on the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the proponent? Commissioner Staunton?
I just want to start, Mr. Michaels, by saying that, from my own perspective, I'm quite impressed. And one of my big issues was leaving an orphan property next door, and one of the things I urged you to do was to consider expanding, and you've done that, and I know that probably was not easy to do. So I'm impressed, and I'm really, I think it's really a good thing that you've done that, and I think it solves, when you talk about the community benefits, that solves one of the issues that I was concerned about, leaving kind of an orphan property there that we might have trouble developing in the future.
Well, thank you. We did not consider that property an orphan site, but it was a
I didn't want to make it an orphan.
It was a team effort with Aurora Investments and good site planning by Edfar Architects to be able to achieve that. So everyone contributed, and thank you.
I think that's really positive. So can you talk to us a little bit about the 2-phase and why you kind of finished up your presentation with some of the understandable kind of economic imperatives that you've got? Can you help me understand how that fits into the 2-phase and what you're envisioning, how that works?
Absolutely. My business is leasing medical office space. It's all I've done all my life. I've got a pretty good feel for different hospital campuses on what they can absorb. Southdale area, I feel, can absorb about 30,000 feet per year. If you look historically over the last 4 or 5 buildings that have been constructed, Aurora Investments will be owning the building long term, but nobody likes empty real estate. You've got to pay taxes, heat and lights on it. So we feel comfortable in our first phase, which was 69,000 square feet. We knew we had to acquire that westerly site to see some of the development and circulation that you see there. It's just not prudent right now based on very little leasing that's been committed on the building. Traditionally, medical office space does not get pre-leased until you get it approved at the city and are just about ready to start construction. So to sum it up, we're comfortable on a 2-year leasing cycle, roughly 30,000 feet per year. If things go very well, that means the building would be leased in a little over 2 years. That does require some substantial risk, but we'll work real hard on that site. Once the first phase is complete, not quite sure when the second phase would start, but we have done this several times at other sites where we've built in the footing, foundation, roof structure to accept future phases. So we're comfortable with 65, 70,000 feet phase 1, but because the land is so expensive, we do need to have that incentive into the future to be able to spread out that land cost over the 102,000 square feet.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then the other question I have, Mr. Chair, is just a little bit, and it may be more appropriate for Mr. Farr, but I'd just like some of the thought process about the configuration of the site plan with the new kind of two-parcel. To me, the major change is you're not facing that 65th and France corner anymore, and if you could just elaborate a little bit on the rationale for that and why you didn't stay on France and 65th and why you've kind of turned inside a little bit.
Yes, Commissioner Staunton, thank you for asking. The previous application where we did have the entrance off of France and 65th did afford us a number of things. It afforded us to put our face towards that key intersection to say, really, hello and welcome everybody driving past. That said, we do understand that this is a vehicle-centered environment, and our true passion is to get our patient, our customers, to the front door as effectively as possible and conveniently as possible to minimize their steps to the elevator and to their doctor visit. So when we had the opportunity to introduce the car into the site off of 65th and do what I explained before about the turnaround, the drop-off, prior to entering our parking structure and maneuvering through there for parking, getting out of your car and moving to the office building, that is a terrific benefit to our customers. So this zone here, acting as our front door, functionally is a home run for medical office building, and we weren't able to achieve that in our prior plan.
Oh, so you just didn't have room in the prior plan?
We did not have room.
Okay.
We did not have room.
And then you mentioned that one of the parking levels is below grade. Is there a plan for direct access underground to the building, or is that still going to be come up the stairs and cross?
We do now have an elevator core in our detached parking structure. Before, when the parking deck was adjacent to the building on that smaller site, we shared an elevator in the office building because every level of the parking deck was at that floor level of the office building, and you could walk from parking deck level to office level. With the detached structure, we do have an elevator serving all parking levels. So if you want to name these A, B, C, D, E, just to differentiate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, level B here is at grade with floor 1 of the office building. Level A is the one that's down below grade and has no access to the public way. The access off of 65th to the west and to the central area here is both into level B of the parking structure.
So the below grade one. I'm sorry, I got confused with A and B. B
I'm
is
sorry.
below grade?
A is below grade.
A is below
A is
grade.
the lowest. A,
So you go in
B,
at
and grade.
A, you go in at B, and you go down to A,
That's correct.
and then stairway up, or did you say there is an elevator?
There's an elevator and a stair core. We have some floor plans in your packet that I'd be more than happy to go over in greater detail, but there's stairs and elevators at this location, go all the way up and down all levels of the
Okay.
parking structure.
Then final question. In your narrative, I noticed there was a mention of a potential of a skyway across to the parking ramp. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that would work?
I can. I don't want to say it's half-baked, but we didn't draw it up because we don't know if it's going to happen or not, but the opportunity does exist to spring from, I believe it's level D, which would be a future one more level up during Phase 2, over to, I believe, 4th floor of the medical office building, crossing over the loading zone, bridging that 30-foot gap between the two buildings. If for some reason there was an advantage to doing that, whether that was tenant-driven or something else, we're going to make structural accommodation for that.
Oh, so that was Skyway from your parking ramp to your building?
That's correct.
Not from the...
No.
Not across the 65th?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Platter?
Yeah, I to kind of follow on Kevin's comments, I like that you've taken over the whole site, and one thing that really bothered me before was the circulation in front of your buildings and how you got in there, and it seemed very, very tight, and it seems to do that better now. So I have a couple of comments. And maybe since you say you've done this before, but how easier to add on to a building that's already being occupied for both parking and the building? I mean, what I'm getting at is that really a realistic thing to do 4 stories now and 6 later, and how would that impact your business with that, or does it?
Commissioner Plattner, it can be done. It's logistically challenging. I've done it twice. We usually do it in the winter because it does not rain in the winter. So we build the superstructure of the next 2 floors, take off the heating and cooling units, move them to the roof, fill in around the outside, and traditionally we don't lose clinic days. But it is challenging, and you will think real hard and long before we do it.
Okay.
But it will be a possibility.
Okay. And then the other comment I have is along France Avenue, I believe it was mentioned that you don't have any storefront openings along there now. Is it just glazing along there? And I think...
It is. Design hasn't changed from the previous application. We just don't know the level of retail that we may get on that first floor. In our narrative, we suggested that there may be a coffee shop or something like that, in which case that area at the corner of 65th there, where there's some landscaping, we would have a seating area. People could go out, have a cup of coffee, and enjoy that plaza area very nicely. We'll encourage tenants to take advantage of that opportunity to the extent they want to. We're not sure if they will want to, again, coming off of the entrance, which is now on the west side of our building. So we're not planning on buying doors and putting those in those storefronts at this time, but the storefront that we will purchase is very friendly to accepting those doors in the future, should the tenant require that based on leasing.
Well, I'd ask you to really consider that, because I think that's a great opportunity along France there to really energize that area, whether it's a coffee shop or whatever's going on, that you see those storefronts there.
Sure.
And then the other comment I have is, I realize how you turn the corner there onto 65th with your main entrance, but to me that your best corner then on France and 65th kind of looks plain right now. It doesn't have the punch that it did before. So I would suggest something be done there to make it a more monumental corner, because that's what people are going to see. I understand when you have so many people coming in from the back, but you did have that situation before. But really, I think you want to showcase it on France versus having it really tucked to the back on 65th, which is really a secondary street. So I would look at that. I think one of the things we talked about before was the Skyway, and I see you say something about it in here, and I don't know what. Again, I would strongly encourage that to be looked at as trying to connect this whole area and not just build all these different pieces around. So the Sky Bridge over to the Southville piece with that. I had one comment on the circulation going into your ramp, and so I like what you did, and did it for the most part. Can you pull that up by chance? Look on that.
Okay.
So if you could go on a little bit kind of towards the middle of the plan there. So right by the loading dock, you have another in and out there. Is that for ADA spaces only, or what is that for?
That's a good question. Yes, there are 6 accessible stalls, free parking, that are available right here, so that in the event that someone wants to drop somebody off and they have a handicap sticker on their car, one option is to go in to paid parking right here, but for quick access to accessible stalls, we have a group of 6 accessible stalls here. Again, being medical office, we want to have that be very easy for people, and that's directly off of our drop-off circle. So that's a very limited parking area of just 6 stalls right there.
So you might want to do something there and state that, so you don't have everyone going that way. And what I'm concerned about is just where you drive in and you drive across the main out ramp there too. And well, you kind of do that even for the drop-off, but I don't know if there's some other barriers or medians you can put up there or something to try and get that a little bit better.
Yeah, we're going to have signage.
I see a lot of things happening right there. That
Sure. There's a lot of decision-making when you...
A lot of decisions in a very quick time. You have to come in there to make those decisions with that. The other comment I have is I know why you did it, but the loading dock and you have the right turn out to the street. Is that intended for public to come out that way as well? Or doesn't it? Are you encouraging it or not discouraging it or anything?
We're offering it as a third choice for egress from the parking structure. So there will be signage on your ramping way down from upper levels. There will be signage saying exit to 65th Street, exit to France Avenue South. And that'll be a choice when you reach this point on level B, which is grade, that you can take that out and then go southbound France.
Okay.
This is one way south on our loading area here. We don't anticipate any people. We're not offering that left-hand turn to come back up this way. So if you want to exit to 65th, there will be signage inside the parking structure directing you towards either one of these 2 65th Street exits.
Yeah, and this next thing is just a comment. It's, we talked about this before, I think, but you're really duplicating what's at Point of France with roads there, but maybe it is what it is. It's just too bad that couldn't be a green space or something. I know it looks like you're down in a non-permeable area, but that would just seem like another large spot to do that versus having a road there. Maybe that is what it is.
Right. That was our first sketch plan where we tried to join up and have that shared facility, and
okay.
That was not received well.
So those are my concerns or questions. So like I said, I like that you've expanded it and you actually have a way to circulate in the site now, which you didn't have before.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher?
Is it possible to put up the Tangletown? There was a slide that showed the Tangletown stuff, and while we're waiting for that, I'll just make a few other comments. I would agree on some of these are going to seem a little random. I'm just going through my list here. The cornice line on the parking structure, I agree. I don't think it should be highlighted as a dark color. I think you want to make the parking as light and airy as you can possibly make a parking ramp. To that extent, I'm not even sure about the dark bronze on the louvers. It seems like, and it's a design thing, and you got to pick what feels right. But to try to not make those punch too much would be good. I'm not going to belabor some of the comments that have been made. I think the site plan is far better than it was before. Having the amount of space to do what you need to do and to still have green space is very important. Makes the FAR work. One of the things, I guess, if just to get into some of the nitpicky stuff, and the reason I asked you to put up this slide, I think the landscaping you're proposing, the streetscape, the setback on France is all a very good thing. I actually think moving the drop-off where it's moved will function way better for this site. The concern I have, and it's been mentioned a little bit, is we can't sort of underestimate the impact on the pedestrian environment and what we're trying to do along France Avenue as in totality. So it's great to have this streetscape, but if there's no life on that side of the building, it's going to fall flat. But I think you're close. I think it's actually minor moves that you could make to make that work. And I guess the question I would ask you is and the reason I have this slide up, you can see in some of these images behind these beautiful landscape plantings, you actually see doors and some canopies and things that signal to people that there's a pedestrian environment here, there's activity here, beyond just, light behind the glass. And I think having some of those elements, and again, you can't predict the tenant mix yet, but really pushing some of that along that long wall will be really important. And I think it will change dramatically the feeling of this building on France. And then I would say that as a cue to the pedestrian from France, whether they're coming on bike or on foot or just driving by and wanting to sort of see, is there something happening here? There's a building or a door on it would be sort of the podium on the north side, right? It looks like a single door. Right. And if you look at the floor plan, it looks like clearly there's a corridor going straight to the elevator core in the building. Now, is that intentionally, can you enter the building there, or is it only exit?
You'll be able to enter the building there.
Good. That was what I was hoping you were going to say. So if you can enter the building there, it seems like without too much design change, we could make that just a little, take it up a notch, make it more than a single door, make it double door with something that says, hey, this is an entry. And granted, it's still back a little bit, but I think if you played with that just a little bit, it would just come off better and would help. So I would look at that entry and then the life and potential entries along France. And I think that would really, I think it would be dramatic improvement. I'm a little concerned about the shallowness of the podium along France being only 10 feet. I think it works a lot better than what you had. But the shallowness, and the concept of looking past the podium and it's supposed to kind of make you feel like you're in front of a 2-story building versus a 6-story building. If it were a little deeper, it would have a lot more impact. But I also get the challenge here of, because you'd have to give up some other things. So I'm not going to press that too hard, but just want to make the point that I think ideally a podium would be just a little bit deeper than that. Otherwise, I generally don't have any huge issues. I just want to make those points.
Okay. Thank you for your comments very much.
Commissioner Forrest.
To go a little bit further with what has been said already, I do like the layout. I like the flow much better. I think it's much more convenient. As Commissioner Platter said, with careful signage and asphalt painting and things like that, so when somebody whips in off that busy 65th Street that we were talking about earlier, they can make their decisions quickly. I'm very disappointed that the facade has changed so dramatically on the corner of 65th and France. Previously, it had the potential of being a landmark, an entry point into that part of the city off of the highway, and I think it was a much more attractive look. I also, you had your crown at the top of the building, and your entrance in the back the grandness of it is not going to be, I think, appreciated so much by the people arriving at the turnaround area other than at the ground level. So it's still going to seem like, it's not going to seem like a front door as much. It's not going to be as visible from 65th Street, let alone from France, as here we are and this is our entrance. I really miss the fact that there aren't storefront entrances on France. I'd like to see us get away from the formulaic medical office building with, a little drugstore area in here, maybe a coffee shop, and be a little bit more creative as far as and open-minded about what can be done here that makes it a draw for the public and not just here's the medical office building, there's your parking, come this way. I'm also concerned when I look at that entrance and the first floor plan, I don't see an area where the clientele can sit and wait for their ride comfortably. It looks like there's lockers on one side of the door on the inside, and there's hallway and such and leased space. But I think it's really important, especially for our older residents and the older clientele, to to have comfortable area to sit and to wait and to gather or whatever near the door, and perhaps even some awning-type stuff outside and comfortable benches. So I'm very disappointed that the streetscape has changed. I mean, we still have fancy landscaping, but it's kind of like, what's the point? Who's going to gather there when there isn't a door out there and all the activity is being directed to the back? I'd like to see it as a more welcoming building that people can see beyond the identity of it being a medical office building. So that's my biggest bugaboo. I'd also like, I mean, as we go forward with this, I think we should, because it's a PUD, there's things that we want to get from you too, and I think we should maybe address signage, that if you do get first floor retail, that there aren't exterior signs for those businesses, maybe window signs, I'm not sure, but that's considered and taken carefully, that bicyclists know where to park their bikes, that they know that this is going to be, I can ride my bike there early on. Maybe that's part of your whole green initiative training follow-up with the clientele, that's something that goes out with a mailing before their first appointment or something like that. I'm not sure. I do like the idea of having outdoor sculptural elements that, such as a sculptural piece at the turnaround area. Perhaps there could even be some creative sculptural aspects to the planters or things along the France and 65th as well. Things that make it an interesting place to walk around and to look at. I'd love to see, this would be an ideal area for, I'm belaboring the whole art thing, but I think it would be a great area to have some gallery space inside. That's one thing when it's owned by a management company versus like the clinic owns the building type thing. They're more likely to invest in art, especially main floor lobby type art. But I think it would be good to consider something like that. Again, you can draw on the public for reasons other than just the doctor's appointment. So that's a few of my scribbles.
Other questions of the proponent? I have a question for Mr. Michaels. You discussed this project with Point of France, and since the last time, you've now included an office building that has tenants in it, I suppose, who will probably be displaced during the construction. Have you discussed this project or had any conversation with any of those folks, and as far as what, if I've got an office in that second building, what might be my options for going forward, anything like that?
Chairman Griebel, to restate your question, you're asking about the 4005 building tenants,
right.
The 18. Yes, we have a very specific alternative for them. Aurora Investments is planning on purchasing a nearby building, and we have very similar to quality as the 4005 building, and we have contacted each one of those businesses and have given them an offer they can't refuse. So yes, we want to retain each of those groups in the Edina area, and we have a specific plan for each one of them, including the Milovitz Law Firm and including the law firm that owns the 4005 building. So we want to retain them as customers.
Well, there's plenty of lawyers around, but some of the other tenants are medical tenants.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, it'll be.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. That's an appropriate thing, and thank you for that. Other questions of the proponent? Very good. Thank you very much for your presentation this evening.
Would you like me to address any of those 4 or 5 comments of Commissioner Forrest?
If you wish, yes. We'll have to address them some point.
Okay. As far as bicycles, on our plans we have a specific 20 by 15 room that is air tempered, and it'll have specific signage, well-lit, clean for those bicycle users. We encourage that as an alternative transportation with the ZAP system. So we will be working hard on that. The plans you look at are very scaled down. The lobby is large. Every medical building we have specific areas for elderly to sit, waiting for the Medivan, the taxi, whatever. Thank you for your comment. We agree with you 100%. We go to strong efforts for that. We do like art in the main lobbies of the buildings and on each floor. And I invite you to tour a couple of our most recent buildings, 212 Medical Center out in Chaska. We had a $40,000 budget specifically for art inside the building. Retail doors, we're working with a couple of retail groups right now that would like doors on France Avenue and would like signage. So we agree with you 100%. The building is somewhat unique in that we are able to offer them access and entrance on France Avenue with signage, and that's worth a lot of money to groups that like signage for that use. I think that about covers it. Thank you.
We will now hear comments from other folks in the audience this evening. If you would wish to make a comment about this proposal, we would ask that you come forward to one of the two podia, state your name for the record, and make your remarks. As always, the same remark repeated 10 times over doesn't make it any better remark. It just takes additional time. But we do want to hear every point of view, and we want everyone to feel like they've had an opportunity to have their point of view heard. So open the floor to citizens in the audience who wish to make any comments about these proposals.
Good evening. Thank you. I guess I will begin. There are a number of Point of France residents here tonight. I'm Marilyn Kemme, a resident of Point of France, 6566 France Avenue South, apartment 1206, and the newly elected president of the Point of France Association Board. Mount Development, Stephen Michaels and Ed Farr met with the residents of Point of France on June 14th and presented their third proposal. With the purchase of the adjacent building and parking lot, owners were pleased with the appearance of the new plan, and the response was very positive at that meeting. The new plan calls for a two-phase approach, which we all know. Phase one is a 4-story building and a 3-story parking lot. There was little opposition at Point of France for phase one of the 4-story building. Phase two calls for the additional 2 stories to a 6-story medical building and a potential 5-story parking ramp. After the meeting, the board asked for additional owner comments, especially from residents living, those residents on the north side whose living room and bedroom windows face the project. There is some owner opposition to a 6-story building. Owners facing the parking lot offered additional suggestions that were included in the letter we sent to Carrie Teague, the planning director. There has been discussion among owners of the 2 phases, such things as if the phase one building, 4-story building was built, would a phase two ever be built? Or considering the cost of adding floors to a building, would the developers immediately build it a 6-story building? They've already responded to some of those questions tonight. I just want to say we do appreciate the developers' purchase of the additional land and their creation of a more attractive building and parking lot, much better vehicle and pedestrian approaches, and attractive landscaping. And with a good coffee shop, you might get a lot more life from Point of France residents on France Avenue. To summarize, there's little owner opposition to the 4-story building, but there is some owner opposition to the 6-story building. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kemme. Yes, sir.
Gary Lickletter, Point of France, 209. I'm a board member there. I would like to say that there was a fine presentation that was made at Point of France. But I did ask a simple question. When you get to the 4th floor, what's to stop you from going to the 6th? And I got an answer of nothing. So let's say that this is a one-phase deal, and it's included all the way up to the 6th floor. Unless you put a stop to those last 2 floors, we're going to have a 6-story building. So I would really like to have you think that over. Point of France may be 13 floors high, but never has it interfered with a view of a single resident here in Edina. This 6-story building is going to cause a lot of views to disappear of the downtown area from the people of the Point of France. Now, it doesn't seem to me that it would be very feasible if you were to stop at the 4th floor and decide a year later that you're going to add 2 more floors. It would cost millions of dollars to take off the roof, add a new roof, raise the elevators, the plumbing, the heating, the electrical. They're not going to stop at 4th floor. This is going up to 6. So let's say what it is, a 6-story building unless you put a stop to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Licklider.
Mr. Chairman, my name is John Windhorst. I'm also a resident of Point of France, Unit 204, and a member of the board.
You used to be the president, isn't that right?
I was the president until last month.
Okay.
I'm now the former president. I would like to comment a little bit on this question of the extra 2 stories. I was struck tonight in looking at the drawings overhead by the fact that the 4-story building is very attractive, and the 3-story or 2-story parking ramp fits in very well with the landscape. And it fits in very well with that entire block. Of the other structures currently on that block, there's only one that exceeds 4 stories or 4 levels, and that's the Twin Cities Orthopedics parking ramp, which is 5 levels. If this structure goes to 6 floors, it's going to have the FAR ratio of about 1, but that is significantly in excess of the ratio at Twin Cities Orthopedics, which is 0.85. So my view is that the additional 2 stories, regardless of when it happens, whether it's done now, as Mr. Licklider suggests might be the case, or a few years down the road, it is going to make a significant difference to the appearance of this building, not only for people at Point of France, but also for other people in the community who are traveling in that area. So I would strongly encourage the Commission to consider authorizing just 4 stories for this building.
Thank you, Mr. Windhorst.
My name is Mark Waterston, and I'm also a resident of the Point of France and have been at these other hearings. I think these guys did a nice job coming back with a new plan, and I think they're dropping off passengers off of 65th Street is a very, very good idea. I think it's one of the most unique corners in Edina because of the emergency vehicles that travel there. I think that anything they can do to minimize traffic, because emergency vehicles have been just stuck in traffic jams, and I think that this helps address that. But I think they're a little disingenuous in the fact that they say we're going to do a 4-story thing, but we want approval for a 6-story thing. You know, when they were talking about the height of these buildings, they referred to the height of all the buildings in the area in feet. And then when they came to the Point of France, they referred to the height of the building in stories. Our building's got 8-foot ceilings, 8-foot floor to ceilings, and they got about 10 inches of concrete in between. So we're based on 9 stories, but we're a 9-foot building. You know, they're at 81 feet. Nothing has been mentioned about the HVAC on the roof that would make it considerably higher than that, would make it close to equal to almost the top floor of the Point of France. And I think one thing that we've kind of forgot about too is they want to make this a planned medical district, but currently there's 300 people that live on this street right here between the Point of France and the apartment building. There's 300 residents that live there. You know, it's not a planned medical. The medical is across the street. Southdale is across the street. But what this is a residential neighborhood. There's over 300 residents in this small area. It is probably one of the more dense areas in Edina with the number of residents that live there. And I think more consideration should be given to the residents that are there rather than to a planned medical. Planned medical is across the street, and they do very well over there with their planned medical. I just think it's a little too much for the neighborhood where the people that live there are. And I think that it should be scaled down. I even think 4 stories is a little high, but everybody else seems to think that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waterston.
Good evening. My name is Mary Kramer, and I'm at Point of France. I'm in Unit 801, and I face north. My biggest concern, and those of other residents in our building, is the traffic congestion. 65th Street is a 2-lane street, 1 lane in each direction. There will be more congestion, there is now, and it will cause problems for people that want to bike or want to walk, and I just can't see anyone addressing these issues. There is a bus, number 6, that goes on 65th westerly in a westbound direction 19 times a day. It goes eastbound 19 times a day. So we already have the congestion of a bus. This added traffic is an environmental hazard that nobody has talked about. Adds more air pollution. The obstructive view for the residents facing north from probably 7th floors down, maybe 8th, we don't know. There's no given information or details of how we will be affected by that. There was a point made about bicycling. I would challenge anyone to bicycle on France Avenue. That would be like going down 494. I don't understand how this is feasible. Sidewalks, the sidewalks for biking, it certainly can't be done on the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer.
My name is Norman Gerstel. My wife and I have occupied for 7 years the apartment at PH4, which does face west and north in Point of France. While this proposed building does affect us in some ways, it certainly does not have the dramatic effect of those people who live below us. I agree that the plan that's now been presented certainly will be beneficial in terms of at least our view and those people who live above the 4th and 5th floors, because at least with the 4th floor having a green roof, and we've got rid of or getting rid of 1405, it'll be a much nicer view. However, the cost of buying an apartment at Point of France to many of its residents is a very, very important thing. and the cost of selling is an even more important thing. I believe that by putting a 6-story building, those people who face north in any part of their apartment will reduce substantially the value of their apartments. It'll even have effect on those apartments that are on the 7th, 8th, and 9th floor, because as was pointed out, the building doesn't stop or wouldn't stop at the 6th floor. It would go to approximately 8th or 9th floor with the HVAC equipment on the roof. I do not have any objection, nor do I think many of the people in Pointe-à-France have, to a 4-story building. But I think the idea of allowing the developer to go to 6 floors would devastate many of the residents of Pointe-à-France. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerstle.
Good evening. I'm Stacy Gallup, and I am one of the owners of the 6500 France building, and I'm here on behalf of the other owners of the building also. I want to commend Mount Development for listening to the concerns this commission expressed 2 months ago when they appeared before you, and for being flexible and responsive to your concerns. And tonight, I urge this commission to also be flexible. When dealing with old buildings, such as our old building, that flexibility is vital to reach the city's goal of creating a first-rate, aesthetic, upscale, regional medical facility. And this plan is consistent with the city's comprehensive guide plan. It is not, our plot of land is not coded as residential. It's coded as, or your plan says it's regional medical. So we urge you to accept it. It will be a vast improvement from our law office. It will substantially increase the tax base of the land. It will provide jobs, and it will provide necessary small businesses to that side of France Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gallup.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Peter Pastorino. I'm one of the tenants and one of the owners of the 4005 building. I've been sitting in that building for 32 years, perhaps far longer than many of the folks who have spoken here tonight. And while I have been in that building, I have seen that corner and that area change from a commercial area of a number of buildings utilized in a similar way to the one that my building currently is, and my building works, but I've seen it totally change to the contrary of what I've heard here. It is not a residential area along 65th Street. It is part of the medical campus which has grown around Fairview Southdale Hospital, and which I think this planning board very sensibly looks to expand as part of a medical campus. This is a very logical expansion of what currently exists. I must admit, my office sits in the southwest corner of my building, and I look out at that pond. I can remember a large green space when Edina Realty owned that property. It's all changed. No one, as I was told by this very planning committee, ever guaranteed me sight lines. And I must admit, I never paid for them. So in talking about having change come to that area, there is now a very exciting opportunity. And although I don't relish pulling up stakes from where I've been for 32 years, and very successfully not only practiced law but owned a building which has very successfully worked for us, I do think that the time has come to move on, and that this is a very exciting opportunity to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pastorino. My earlier remark about lawyers was not directed at you, so. Other persons wishing to comment? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion then to close the public hearing. Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much for your comments and your participation this evening. We do appreciate hearing each and every person who wishes to speak to us. With that, we'll bring the matter back up to the table here for comment and discussion. Commissioner Staunton?
Mr. Chair, in her comments, Ms. Kemme spoke about some of the things that were in her letter. We did receive, when we arrived today, a letter dated June 25th to the Planning Commission from the Point of France Association, and it talks about some of the things that Ms. Kemme talked about, but there's also some discussion about parking ramp issues. I wonder if the applicants have seen the letter and have any, there are some things that they're suggesting with respect to the parking ramp. I'm wondering if any of those, if you've seen it, and if you have any thoughts about what those suggestions are.
I'll try as best as I can. We're very pleased with the design of our parking structure, the way it has been proposed. We have gone out of our way with the use of these louvers. Commissioner Fisher had a couple comments about the louver color, as a matter of fact, that maybe I could just reintroduce to you, to try and make it look as much like an office building as possible, I think, were suggestions from staff, and that was our motivation in design. And we believe that the colors and textures and scale components of the parking structure fit and are very compatible with specifically the base of the medical office building. We did take care and provide variety of design and detail on the parking structure accordingly. To Commissioner Fisher's comment about the color of the louvers being dark, which I did specifically to try and make them appear like windows so that the parking structure would be more like an office building. We are very open to changing it on your permission to maybe a lighter tone to keep the parking structure a little bit lighter on its feet still. But again, the dark bronze tone was selected to make them look like windows and carry that effect through to be consistent with the medical office building.
If I can just follow up on that, because that is one of the comments was the face break, and we talked about that earlier, and you've addressed that again, and I get that. And then another comment was just looking for assurance about the louvers, and I think that's pretty clear from your plan that you're going to do louvers on all three sides.
Correct.
And so I think that's something that is consistent with what they're asking for. There was some discussion, some request about having greater specificity concerning the cutoff features of the lighting fixtures. I don't know if you have any comment on that. And then there was a request for planters with shrubs and flowers to be placed on the top level of the parking ramp to increase improve the appearance. And then the final thing was a concern about the fee-based nature of the ramp, and a concern that Point of France parking may become overflow for people who don't want to pay the fee. And any comments that you might have addressing that would be helpful too.
All right. I might perhaps let Mr. Michaels address the fee portion of the parking structure. Sharp cutoff luminaires will be specified for the top level of the parking structure. We would do that anyway to make sure that light spill is contained directly towards our surface parking and not onto the neighbor's property, both on the west and the south, as well as 65th Street as well. Those would be the pole lights that are on top. Of course, the fixtures that are within the parking structure will be completely shielded by the louvers on the outside.
I'm sorry, I threw a whole bunch of them at you.
That's right. The second one.
Flowers on the top of the parking ramp?
Flowers. Actually, I looked at that with the landscape architect, not because of this specific comment, but before, under our previous application, we were thinking about vines. And the landscape architect replied to me that in our harsh climate in the wintertime, there's really no way to keep anything green year-round or get it watered on a regular basis for that to be effective, short of planting plastic flowers or something like that in flower pots, it's not an effective screening technique. So
Okay.
we believe that just with use of good architecture, good colorization to match the office building, and with the trees that we hope will grow quickly for them on the coniferous 12 months a year, we're providing adequate buffering and screening.
Okay. And then, Mr. Michaels, I assume you'll address the parking fee issue?
Yes. Our 6363 France office building was the first to implement paid parking. It worked out very well. In Minnesota, people want to park as close to the front door as possible. The modest parking fee has not been a hindrance to people using that paid facility. So we do depend on that parking fee to run the project, and we do everything we can to make that as convenient as we can to get those patients parking in the ramp and going inside the building. All our suburban hospitals now have paid parking. Methodist has for years. North Memorial, certainly the downtown facilities have paid parking.
Is that something that individual tenants may make choices about in terms of validating parking for customers, et cetera? That would be up to them, I assume.
Clinics, we sell 1,000 lots of stickers if the clinics choose to validate parking. Yes.
And when you've mentioned the 6363 building a couple of times, I'm just trying to make sure, is that the one straight across the street from both Point of France and this on the other side of France?
Be right next to the front door of the hospital by the heliport.
Oh, it's on the other side of 65th?
Yes.
Okay.
It's in 1991.
All right, thank you.
Other comments? Commissioner Forrest?
I was just wondering, in light of the discussion about the louvers on the parking ramp, is there a tint to the windows on the building? Is there a bronze tint or something to that it's compatible with? Is there a reason for that? Or?
Yes, the bronze are, the windows are bronze
Okay.
tinted, that's correct.
And then I guess what I'm bothered by the fee for the parking as well, because it's one thing to pay a fee at a hospital to go in, but one of the advantages of somewhat lesser density out here is that you can go to a hair salon at the mall and not pay for parking. You can go to your clinic and not pay for parking. And I am concerned about the impact on the neighbors, because already there are issues in the neighborhood with employee parking and things like that, and even visitor parking for the hospital and those clinics. So I'm kind of leaning toward that. If you can validate as much as possible the clientele, that might be helpful. But I was also back here. I think we need to think about how we can best make this, it is a regional medical area now. It is, and that is what is in our comp plan, and I agree with that. I think it's good. But we do have nearby residents, and what can we do? How can we be creative to make this an amenity for them rather than a detriment? Can we make it a gathering spot? Can we make it, provide whatever? I think we need to think along those lines a little bit. We want, with the PUD process, we want things to benefit the community, but that part of the community does have people who live there. And any way we can minimize the impact, the better. I would like 4 stories better. I'm not adverse personally to the 6 stories. So I would go on the presumption that it would be 6 myself. But I do understand the viewpoints that have been expressed tonight. I guess also one thing that is nice about doing it in 2 phases or having that option to add on is, if the greenest building is an existing building, then, how adaptable is this building in the future for other uses, if need be. So I guess that's one advantage to having that option at least. And but once again, I think it's, from the street, it's just not inviting the way it is now. It's kind of like, here's all these great sidewalks and plantings, and it's just, is just paint for me, because it's just not, I don't see it being used as a gathering spot right now.
Other comments of the commission? Commissioner Potts.
I've been looking hard at this, at an aerial photograph we have in our packet that shows the immediate neighborhood around this from 66th up to Crosstown, and looking at, trying to think about how this building fits in with this overall, with the overall neighborhood. And I think it's a very logical next step in creating a healthcare campus that functions well. Agree with a lot of what's been said about access and drop-off, loading improvements. The whole site circulation has really been dramatically improved, I think, by purchasing that additional piece of land to the west. That was a good thing to do, as has been said. The thing that is difficult for me is how self-contained the whole thing has become, and that's been brought up in different ways. And the fact that once somebody turns in off of 65th, they very likely won't leave the building again except to leave on 65th. So I think I would encourage the applicants in every way they can to coordinate with the plans that are being made to add pedestrian activity to France Avenue, offer that as an enticement to the people you're trying to lease to by pointing out how much additional traffic will be brought in beyond people who are in the building for a medical visit as a primary reason, and look for more ways to open up the facade along France, as challenging as that can be currently to be on as either a pedestrian or a bicyclist. We are trying to make improvements to that, and I think just dovetailing with those will only improve the project. So emphasizing the connectivity of it, I think, will help.
Other comments? I have a couple. I like this proposal very much. I believe that this is the idea of expanding the medical campus and building that medical campus here in Edina is a good thing for the city, and it's a good thing for all of the residents of the city for several reasons. It increases access to medical care as we age, and a good development. It's like they used to say, a rising tide lifts all boats. A good development lifts all properties within the city, and I think that's a good thing. I do appreciate the new traffic pattern that you've incorporated into this development. Makes a lot more sense than what was there before. I would echo Commissioner Fisher's comments about, and others, about making the visual impact to the corner would be good. But I think this is a great proposal. I am sensitive to the economics that were discussed, the phased approach to go to 4 stories to allow the market to catch up with the space, and then the need for the additional space to make the whole project economically viable is an interesting way to do that. From a height standpoint, I think it's appropriate, looking at the buildings in the area, and I just think you've done a nice job here. I appreciate the fact that you took into account the comments from the commission earlier and your participation with the residents and trying to express your points of view with them and engage them in the discussion process. So those are my comments. Are there any other comments of the commission? Commissioner Fisher.
I would agree that as we look at the renderings today, the 4 stories seems more appealing. But I also think there's a little bit of a psychological thing there. It's the one rendering that shows the translucence of the glass and the reflectivity, and I have a hard time, and I'm trained in this, when I look at the dark spots for windows, it just kind of like blah. And so there's something about that rendering that I think it appeals to people beyond the height. Proportionally, I still like the 4-story better, but I get the whole thing about, you're buying extra property, trying to make this thing work, and I think it would be very difficult to redevelop this site at 4 stories in the long haul. So I can live with the 6-story. Just a couple comments. I haven't mentioned anything recently about this, but I've always really been a proponent of a skyway connecting the campus. And I know that you're only one side of the skyway and you can't force that to happen, but is there a possibility, at least I'd like to hear about this, that you could just at least have prepared your building to accept a skyway in the future, if that were ever to be plausible? And I don't know how much, well, I do kind of know how much goes into that, but it might be a really wise move, just as you prepare for a phase 2, to also be prepared for the evolution of this campus, where if someday it makes sense to be literally linked by skyway, at least it's possible. So I would just throw that out there. And I just wanted to comment, during the public hearing, there was a pretty reasonable question about bicycling on France. And today, of course, it's not even easy you can't imagine wanting to bicycle on France. But coincidentally, I was at a meeting last night hosted by the Transportation Commission, and Mr. Rickert was actually making the presentation. And it's really about a transformation of France Avenue. And it's going to start with some key intersections, but there's really a vision that's starting to take place that sees a different kind of France Avenue. Now, it's always going to have a lot of cars on it, but there's going to be a push over the next several years to make this more pedestrian friendly, and also to look at whether or not we should actually make an effort to have bicycles moving along this corridor. And it's going to be a lot of discussion on this in the next month or two. So as far-fetched as it seems tonight, I think we do have to plan for that. And it's always crazy in the first couple projects, but as time goes along, it starts making a lot more sense. So I just want to throw that out there, that someday we may imagine a France Avenue where bicyclists could function.
Commissioner Forrest?
Are we planning I thought I'd heard rumblings about a bike path or accommodation under the overpass that's on Valley View for bicyclists to make that a safer transition? You've heard maybe, okay. And so I think, too, more and more, if you're talking about this being a major employer, then there will be bike commuters as well who take it pretty seriously and take more risks. I did want to make it clear, though, when we were talking about signage on the building, I'm not in favor of having signs on the building face at all. If businesses are going to be there, maybe windows, paint signs or something like that, but I think that it could spoil, to enter off the crosstown into that area and see this building that's supposed to be an amenity and then have big advertising signs for a drugstore or whatever, I don't like that at all.
Yeah, but how are you going to encourage businesses to take space in the building, and you want them to have doors going out to the street, but you don't want them to be identified?
There's an app for that,
Okay.
No, actually, maybe there's something that can be done with canopies or when you go downtown and you see these big office buildings, you don't see Walgreens blazoned on the side of a new architecturally designed building either.
I see signs for...
There's a mix,
When
yeah.
I walk downtown, I see signs on the street level of buildings advertising the businesses that are
on
on
the street level of buildings, but often it's in the windows or something too. So I wanted to be very careful about that, and also to consider the.
So you don't want billboard signs out there, but
I don't want
you're not opposed to them signing their business.
Exactly, and I don't want backlit Lexan signs, like we have at the shopping malls and strip malls and things at all. I think that should be really tasteful. And people should, pretty much now they learn where things are when they want to go there, when they need to go there. And again, I would like to see it. I was also looking at this the site plan, and I'm seeing, okay, if residents from Point of France wanted to come over and visit a coffee shop, they have to go all the way around the building to get into it, and or cut through the alleyway, so to speak. I mean, to have a nice welcoming entrance, or I would like to see storefront entrances on France would be much nicer.
Chairman Griebel, Commissioner
Yes.
Forrest, would you like me to comment on 3 quick items?
Sure.
Our north, if I could get this slide up on the screen, it's our site plan. This is a large area that we plan as a patio. There's a doorway right here. We actually have a proposal out to a group that would use this entire patio area. We see this as a strong, significant seating area. Tables, chairs. You can hardly go to a restaurant today that does not have outside seating. So we have a very large area that has that opportunity. The 6500 France building currently has no paid parking. On the north side of the street is the Fairview Southdale ramp with paid parking. The Milovitz Law Firm has not had a problem with people encroaching on their property trying to beat the system. So my point is, people tend to go to the area that gets them the closest doorway to their destination. So we feel that validating parking and paid parking will work at our location. As far as Skyway going to the north, we are working on our building to accept a future Skyway should that opportunity arise to the north side. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. My experience is people wait 15 minutes for parking space to open up if it's 3 spaces closer to where they want to go. So, other comments from the Commissioner Staunton?
Mr. Chair, I just want to kind of come full circle. You know, when we first considered this, one of the questions we thought about and then eventually said out loud was, as we're doing these planned unit developments, we have to be thinking about what we're getting in return. And so I said earlier that I appreciated the efforts you made to follow up on the things that we articulated, but one of them that I really appreciate is your narrative, including some of the things that are a benefit to the community. And when I look at the project and when I look at the reasons to go through a planned unit development instead of our normal zoning, one of the things that really jumps out at me is this whole bringing the building to France and 65th. I was on the Planning Commission when we did the building directly across the street, the 6545, and I rued the day that we allowed them to still stay back with the sea of parking in front of it. I really wish that that building would have come to the curb too. And so I'm really pleased to see that we're taking advantage of that opportunity here. And frankly, this is a tool that allows us to do that, and we didn't have that tool back in the 64 when we considered the 6545 building. So I think that's a big part of it. I think getting the podium height that we're talking about is a big part of it. I think making sure that we're not leaving one parcel kind of left over that is hard to develop in the future is a big part of it. All those things go into what we're getting out of granting some flexibility from our normal standards for zoning. The last thing I'd like to just talk about is the height, because that has always been a topic of some emotion in our community. Everybody feels differently about height, and everybody who is next to height would like the height next to them to be lower. I am comfortable in the context of this with the 6 stories, in large part because of so many of the surrounding properties. I mean, as I go through the packet, setting aside the Point of France building, which obviously is 13 stories, there's also the hospital, which is up to 124 feet, the 6545, which is 92 feet and 6 stories, the 6600 and 6800 France Avenue buildings, which are 6 and 7 stories, and Cornelia Place, I'm not sure entirely how tall that is, but I think it's in that same neighborhood, and obviously the Twin Cities Orthopedic. So, you know, to me, that creates a context where it's in the same context as the neighborhood. If everybody else had 4 stories and you were looking for a 6-story building, I'd feel differently about it. But in this setting and with that context, I think a 6-story building is reasonable. And I agree with the comments that we ought to treat it as a 6-story building. We're, you know, if we're approving this, we're essentially saying that we'd be comfortable with a 6-story building. That's the way we ought to look at it. So I am comfortable supporting this, and actually would make a motion to that effect if others don't have further comments.
Any other comments? Commissioner Scherer?
Just a clarification for Commissioner Staunton. So with regard to your comment, which I really resonate with, that when we go this route, we certainly can ask for some things. Would you like to place in your motion some clarification about access on the France side of this building? I mean, I totally agree that the podium I like seeing, but it's very cosmetic as it exists now. It's just an addition to the building. It doesn't accomplish any of the other things other than some height mitigation from the streetscape that we would hope to accomplish with a podium. That friendliness, the open doors, the types of businesses, the gathering places. So my question would be if we could include that in our
I would
motion.
be supportive of that.
Thank you.
I would welcome that. I mean, that is the one concern is, and I recognize you've got some logistics here about when the site gets redeveloped and you have a nice opportunity to do the drop-off, but I don't want to see you turn. I'm sensitive to the comments about turning your back to France and making sure that we don't do that. And while the seating area and the like, and we do have, it sounds like, in the interior configuration, a real entrance there, and it's just a matter of how you treat it. And it sounds like you might have some tenants that would be wanting to have openings onto France Avenue. I think those, I don't quite know how I'd want to fashion that as a condition. Did you have a suggestion on that, Commissioner Scherer?
I think I would add it as a condition, that we want to see some sort of business and ingress and egress from that side of the building, and I would make it a condition on the motion that we would act on this evening.
How do you, I'm not sure how that works. How can you make a condition? You must rent to certain people.
I guess I would say it's a function of a PUD. We're certainly not, I mean, there are many, many businesses that would operate that would want doors coming. It's not like we're saying you must have a restaurant or you must have a Starbucks. I wouldn't go that far.
Well, I think we are, you know, one of the procedural opportunities we have here is while we will go through the comp plan change only once, there will be, as I understand it, Carrie, from your presentation at the beginning, that this comes back to us in a final plan form later. So if we had as part of a preliminary approval this notion of emphasizing access off of France, then that's something we can evaluate when it comes back in a final.
Okay, Carrie, help me out here. The recommendations, there are two. The recommendation from the staff is first that we do a comprehensive plan amendment to allow the 6-story building on this site, and we're subject to the findings that are contained on pages 11 and 12. And then the second action would be the preliminary rezoning to the PUD, subject to the findings and conditions on pages 11 and 13. Am I reading that correctly?
That is correct. You could do that as one motion if you like, or separate them out.
Well, the last time we did this, we took the plan amendment first, because if that didn't pass, there was no point in doing the second. So I would prefer, unless, I guess my thought would be we do two motions, but if you want to do one, that's fine too.
If I might add, from what I heard from the discussion, one of the conditions, condition 1A, staff was recommending the continuation of the cornice. I think I was hearing from the commission that did not want to see that carry forward, so you could remove that as one of the conditions.
So with that, Mr. Chair, I would move
Page 11.
Thank you. Well, I thought you wanted to do you wanted to do the plan first and then the PUD, or the PUD first and then the...
No, the plan first.
You want to do the comprehensive plan first?
That's the bottom of page 11.
All right, so then I would make a motion that we recommend approval of a change in the comprehensive plan consistent with the recommendations in the staff report.
Is there a second to that motion? Second. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
And then I would make a motion that we recommend granting preliminary rezoning to planned unit development for the property consistent with the staff recommendation, with the exception of the face brick on the parking facility, and with the condition that there be efforts to enhance the pedestrian access on the France side of the structure between now and the final plan.
Second.
Is there further discussion? Is there discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you again, all of you, for your participation. I will say to the Point of France residents that a very, very, very good friend of ours just bought an apartment, or bought a condominium at Point of France, and I hope you all have a chance to meet her, because she's just a wonderful lady. So thank you very much. As you're leaving the room, would you mind taking your discussion outside so we can continue our business? They ignored me. I will.
Nice to have a little break in it.
Yeah. I was afraid we lost you. The next item of business before the commission is lot division request for Margaret Schultz, 5100 Ridge Road and 5101 Green Farms Road. Carrie?
Thank you, Chair Grable. Whoops, I got the wrong one up here. Next application is a lot division, 5100 Ridge Road and 5101 Green Farms. It is a lot line shift. We're not splitting the property. It's located up in the northwest corner of the city, So look at the two properties in question. There are existing single-family homes on the property. This is a look at the home on Ridge Road and the home on Green Farms. This is the configuration of the existing lots today. You may note that the home on Green Farms has a relatively small backyard. The Scholes family owns both of these properties. So what they're proposing to do is shift this rear lot line that separates the two back to here in order to provide additional backyard space for that home. As the lots exist today, this lot here on Green Farms doesn't conform with our median lot area and lot depth requirement, but as a result of the shift, it now conforms with all the medians. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the lot division subject to the findings and conditions in the staff report.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Forrest?
What are we taking into account when we're figuring median lot size? How are you, what lots are you thinking of? Because this seems relatively close to the same as all the other lots on that side of the street.
We take all of the properties within 500 feet of both properties and then calculate the median for lot area, width, and depth.
So even with a relatively large lot, they're all quote-unquote non-conforming because there are larger lots next to them, or nearby.
Just the lot on Green Farms is non-conforming. It doesn't meet the median depth.
Well, I mean, none of the lots on that street would then, right?
Right. Right.
That
There would be several here on Green Farms that don't meet the median within 500 feet.
So, yeah, I'm just having difficulty with that. I mean, it's the way our code is written, but it's the application of the situation kind of skews things, and once this lot expands, it would skew it even further for the other owners on the street.
It's non-conforming now and becomes conforming as a result of the shift in the lot line.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 2 to 3 times the size of a Northeast Edina lot, and yet it's non-conforming in size, and that's what's kind of throwing me off. Anyway.
There's an existing building on both lots. I don't understand why we're doing this.
The applicant would like to obtain additional rear yard space, essentially going as the lot exists today, relatively shallow backyard, and they would obtain all of this space here.
So the applicant is on Green Farms Road?
The applicant owns both of the parcels.
Yeah. And then my other question is, why not just bring the northern property line straight back and create the L on the Ridge Road lot instead of that weird configuration the way it is? That just to allow it to circle around the house behind it, next to it.
I guess I'm not sure how you're that I follow where you're looking to.
Okay, the lot line on the north side of the house on Green Farms. The proposal is to bring that back to a point and then move the line, take the line north to the ultimate line. Instead of making that turn right there, why not move that line back so that you have a more rectangular lot rather than this L-shaped lot?
Extending this line straight back to here?
Then, yes, yeah, or to some point in that yard, rather than making the weird L-shaped lot.
I guess we can ask the applicant that. This was how they proposed it. We didn't discuss alternatives or.
Okay. Other comments of questions for staff? Would anybody wish to speak to this issue? Okay, is there a motion? Is the applicant here and wish to speak? I don't see an applicant. Okay. We'll take half the existing lot and give it to the other lot. Okay. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd move approval consistent with the staff report recommendation.
Is there a second to that motion? Second. Is there any other discussion? Commissioner Forrest.
Can we clarify our criteria on this? I mean, basically, it's just, either we need to meet some criteria or we can't say no, it seems like. And again, I'm just kind of thrown off by the idea that we've labeled all the lots on that one street pretty much non-conforming because there are other lots nearby that are bigger when they'd hold, 3 or 4 of some of our other lots in town. So, I don't know if there's, for what reason would we be able to say no even, or are there certain criteria we need to meet that?
I'd be hard-pressed to come up with a reason for denial. You're taking a lot that doesn't conform to the ordinance, and it becomes conforming. So I don't think we have much latitude to say no for a request like this.
So would this long-term effect then make it even more difficult? Could it make it more difficult in the future for the residents on that street with the smaller lots? Say if there was tear down and rebuild or something because that lot's non-conforming at some point?
Well, the median changes lot to lot throughout Edina. If you move 2 lots to the north, the median can change because you're bringing different lots within that 500-foot radius. So really that occurs with every lot in town.
Yeah, I guess it's just it's so we're calculating on something that's out of context completely with what everything else that's on that street. And if we're really, I don't know, if we're really concerned about non-conforming lots, it just seems, I just don't want it to, as this would further skew the median for nearby lots, I just want to make sure it wouldn't ever potentially cause difficulties for somebody who chooses not to enlarge a lot.
I don't believe it's going to have a negative impact.
Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. It's a goofy shaped lot, but it carries. Next item of business, sketch plan review, BKV Group, 5109 and 5117 West 49th Street, Vernon Avenue Senior Housing. Kerry?
Thank you, Chair Grable, members of the Commission. This is another site that you've seen once before with a sketch plan review. The property is located just north of the Grandview area, west of Highway 100, behind the Holiday gas station along the railroad tracks. The site exists today with a single-family home and 2 apartment buildings. So look at the single-family home and the 2 apartments. The apartments contain 4 and 5 units each. The property is zoned PRD 2, Planned Residential District, which allows residential buildings up to 6 units as the maximum size for that zoning district. The site is guided, low-density attached residential in the comprehensive plan. And low-density attached residential contemplates between 4 and 8 units per acre. The applicant is suggesting a comprehensive plan amendment that would change the designation to high-density residential. And as you see, our comprehensive plan contemplates between 12 and 30 units per acre for high density. We do have some of our multifamily developments in town do exceed 30 units per acre. This is a look at the project that you reviewed a couple of months back. It was a 6-story building, 98 units. The applicant has removed 2 stories from that previous plan. Again, this is the old plan. They're proposing to take those 2 stories off the top and then move the building further south away from 49th Street to try to get a little bit further away from the single-family homes to the north. So it would be a 4-story building and 44 feet tall. This is a look at just kind of that demonstrates the massing of the building. The compliance table in the staff report, again, the height establishes the required setback. The setback on 49th Street would be met because they've shifted that down to the south. They would not comply with the PSR 4 or the existing zoning to the Vernon setback or the east or west side. In terms of building height, the PSR 4 standard allows 4 stories and 48 feet. The existing zoning allows 2.5 stories and 30 feet. The building coverage would be exceeded, and the density would comply with our PSR 4 standards at 44 units an acre. However, it doesn't comply with the current zoning that would again allow up to 8 units per acre. Another setback requirement that's not met is our requirement from R1 districts. They have a 15-foot setback on that east side. So with that, I will open it up. This again is a sketch plan review where they're just looking to solicit comments from the Planning Commission. I can stand for questions, or the applicant is also here to present as well.
Could you put the original proposal back up? So that was 6 stories all the way back up the hill, right?
It was 6 stories kind of built into the hill. The view that we're seeing here, this would be 49th Street. Vernon would be in the background. I believe the way they had indicated before, it would be about 4 stories above on Vernon.
Yeah, okay.
2 kind of tucked into the hill.
All right. Other questions of staff? Okay, thank you. For the public, sketch plan is designed to allow a developer to bring an idea before the commission, present that idea, and obtain input and comment from the commission to determine whether or not they want to proceed to a more formal proposal at some later time. So this is not an official function. We're not making any decisions this evening with respect to this plan. We are only hearing from the developer, and we are offering our comments and thoughts with respect to the proposal.
My name is Jim Hunt. I'm with Hunt Associates. We're located at 24 University Avenue, Northeast, Suite 150 in Minneapolis. I want to thank the Planning Commission for taking a second look at our new plan. We've gone over the comments from the Planning Commission, city staff, and the neighbors, and we made significant changes to the design. I'll let the architect detail the changes, but we remain committed to working with all the parties to arrive at a plan that enhances the city of Edina and, most importantly, the neighborhood. Thank you.
Chair Grable, members of the Planning Commission, David Motzenbecker with BKV Group. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for looking at this again. Looking forward to hearing your feedback as we have made some changes from the previous iteration. I'll just go through a few of those and list the differences to highlight those for you. So previously it was 98 unit development. Currently before you is 60, so about a 60% reduction in size there. We went from 60 feet down to 44 feet in height, and you were correct on the Vernon side. in the previous iteration, it was 4 stories, 6 on the 49 side. Now it's 4 across the board. So we've shrunk it on the 49 side, and it remains about the same iteration on Vernon. Total floor area has shrunk down from about halved from 181,000 square feet to about 99. Parking stalls from 132 to 72. Our density has been taken down from 71 units an acre to 44, which was something we realized that's still on the high end, but that was something that was outlined. Commissioner Staunton, you had mentioned some of the highest densities you had approved were in the 44, 43 range, and staff had also outlined those in the staff recommendation. So we were looking at that. Floor area has come down from 3.02 to 1.66, and the setback on 49th has increased from 60 feet to about 84 feet, so a 24 feet increase. Looking at this plan, if I could have this on the overhead, please. Doing some measurements and looking at the setbacks and the spacing requirements, or just the spacing, sorry, along 49th. From about the railroad tracks to the corner is approximately 365 feet. From the center of this development to back to here is 211 feet, so almost 2/3 of the block distance right here. So we are set back quite extensively. This small portion here that sticks out is about 180 feet from the front face of the building across the street. And this portion, I just want to point out, is a small 2-story kind of portion. There's a big, large deck on this that overlooks out. The main bulk of the building we have pulled all the way back to this 211, basically, foot range. Farther on this end, obviously, closer on this. Looking at an average of setbacks, the average setback here is about 46 feet, and the average across the different points of our building is about 112. We have taken and removed one of the driveways, kept one driveway, enhancing the green space, again, keeping the existing trees and making a large terrace lawn to sweep down and kind of pull that building back, keeping the shadows minimized, as you saw in those shadow studies across the street. And those shadows were at the worst time of year, December 21st. So any other time of year, those shadows would be improved. So with that, I will just open it up for your comments on the new plan. We think we have a good proposal. We think that it has met a lot of the concerns that were brought up previously. And we're open to, again, hearing your thoughts on improvements that we could make.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the commission to the applicant? Commissioner Potts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think similar to when you had this in here before, and in particularly in light of the Grandview small area plan, I like the way this massing works up along Vernon. I think that would contribute well to changes contemplated along Vernon Ave and all the Grandview area to the south. Still two big points of concern. One is are the neighbors immediately to the east. Makes me think of the project we just looked at where we suggested acquiring more land to get a little more space. Don't know if you've tried to do that yet or not, but that's the one setback variance that I still have trouble with. I think the others that staff has pointed out are acceptable, and it's good the way the setbacks north of the building now work relative to 49th Street. And so then the second point of concern remains that traffic entering and exiting the site once you come along 49th Street and hit, is it Brookside? I think we need to have some information to react to other than speculation about what's going to happen at that intersection. We understand that you've shrunk the unit count and all of that, yet it still has the potential to add a lot of traffic to this small residential street.
Could I ask for clarification on what would be helpful for the commission to help decide about traffic, understanding that we don't control the egress and ingress into this neighborhood. Would you be interested in seeing a additional drive added from 49th to Vernon, or I guess I'm looking for a little more clarification there, because a lot of the ingress and egress points with these cars, we realize we're adding more traffic to the neighborhood, and anything more than the 9 that exists now would be an addition. How could we deal with the existing traffic intersections that are in place in a suitable way for the commission?
I guess I would take advantage of having Mr. Houle here to see what he might contribute. When I look at this plan and I look at the distance from your proposed curb cut to the intersection, it looks like you might be able to stack 8 cars. I don't know what sort of impact that's going to have in the morning if 16 people are trying to get out.
I would say definitely the traffic counts before and after at that intersection.
Okay.
And I was thinking, how could you get another entrance in from Vernon? I don't know that you can because of the grades and everything going on, but that would be
pretty tough.
Tough, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
So notwithstanding the other issues that are potentially here with traffic and is it too much, I'll just go back to I really think you need a drop-off in front of this for circulation. I know you have a steep grade coming up, but you see a lot of places that have a single, single lane coming up to drop off at that same level as your building.
Okay.
Again, unfortunately get rid of some green space there and things, but I just don't know how it's going to function unless you have that drop off in front of the building with this. And also for, emergency vehicle access, Metro Mobility's coming here or something, just how do you get all that to work? So I really think you need something there, as well as you just don't want to have 49th Street as a place somebody would park to drop off and then come up the steps or something either. Because that's going to happen, even though you have everyone coming underneath it to parking. People are going to show up and not know that, and a bunch of other things. So just the overall density I'm not sure with, or the traffic out of 49th, but notwithstanding those things, you need some more circulation on that site to get through that.
Just comment, and people who have seen me know that I favor redevelopment of areas that need redevelopment, and I think, the apartment buildings there ought to be redeveloped, and this area ought to be redeveloped. What concerns me, you got a bad topographical situation here. You're moving up the side of a hill. Even when you come up the ramp off of 62, you come up to the street, and then there above you is the funeral home, and everything just kind of moves up from this area, and you're putting a big building on the top of this hill. And I just have great difficulty understanding why this is a desirable thing to do in this neighborhood, to put this big structure at the top of a big hill that just kind of dominates everything. I really don't like to be negative about development, but it's hard for me to get my hands around this and appreciate the value of this development for the city. That's my issue with it.
If I could respond just briefly. I think part of what we were going to do, and perhaps it's my fault for not having an image, but I think it would be really helpful to that exact moment with all the existing trees that are along that space that we're planning to keep in place, and then adding additional plantings on there. Right now, you can't see those apartments when you drive on there because of the vegetation is so thick. And most of those trees are substantial trees, 50 to 70 feet. So they would probably do some good screening of that facade. I'm probably sure, too, that the folks living there would benefit from that screen as well, not wanting to look out onto the busy street, but rather having that green space. So we're hoping to use what's there, save some existing trees, and help do that screening. That was some of the intention with that. And with the senior development, I know that's a key part of the comprehensive plan, and the goal is to have kind of life cycle housing. And life cycle housing, I think here would be a benefit because you do have single-family homes close by. It might be easier for a resident who lives nearby to want to stay in their neighborhood and to be able to live in their neighborhood as they age and want to get into a senior facility, as opposed to having to move out of their neighborhood where they've enjoyed living and go somewhere over by the mall or some of the other locations where higher density is more acceptable.
Well, just so you're clear about what my comment is, I'm not nearly so concerned about the streetscape on Vernon Avenue as I am what happens on the north side of this development.
Okay.
You move up a big grassy hill in this big structure. If you're going to fill that green space with 90-foot trees, it might be an entirely different situation. But just to have the open space in that, because the people on the north side of the street there, they've got to feel like, like there's Sisyphus or somebody. Here's the big rock is going to roll down the hill on them, and that's the concern, the visual concern that I have with the project. And I'm not against. I like senior housing. I'm almost a senior. Several more years I'll be a senior. We should have senior housing, but and as I say, I think the area is ripe for redevelopment. But the mass is just of concern to me.
Chair Grimm.
Commissioner Fisher.
I would, here's a concern, and it'll be interesting to see sort of how the City Council looks at this as a policy decision. Just comparing the discussion we just had in this room a little bit ago, we actually recommended a comp plan amendment. So changing the guidance of a site, and which impacts neighbors which need to rely on a comp plan and the guidance. What's interesting about what we just did, though, is the most impacted neighbors are living in a 13-story building next to a building that was already guided to be, medical office. So it sort of fit. There was no big surprise to people that it would be heading in that direction. So now I look in that same thing here, and I look at the neighbors who are sort of relying on the guidance for what's happening around them. And so ultimately, we'd have to go and amend the comp plan and change it from essentially a low-density residential, not the lowest, but, sort of moderately low, to a high-density, which is very different. And clearly what you're proposing is very different than what people would sort of have counted on when they purchased their house or whatever. Do I think you've improved it from the last time we saw it? Yes, you have. But I think the hurdle here is that we try to be very careful about changing dramatically the single-family neighborhoods that we have. And this is, granted, this is sort of a transitional piece, but it's a moderate transitional piece. Do I think this is a really cool project? I think it really could be a cool project. But I don't know if I can get past the dramatic impact it would have on these neighbors. And you know, I also, let's just make one more comparison to the project that was just before us. It's pretty substantial redevelopment happening there, a huge cost, I think, comparatively, to take those two properties and to develop what they were trying to develop. I look at this, and I'm not sure, just intuitively, I feel like you need to have this kind of density to cover what it's going to take to buy these properties that are there in the condition they're in. And I have no mathematical basis to say that. It just feels like you're shooting here when you maybe don't need to. That's just sort of my off-the-top feeling.
Commissioner Potts?
Two other comments, I think, picking up on what Chair Grable and Commissioner Fisher said. I agree with Commissioner Fisher largely. I think there are certain aspects of this that can be addressed, specifically the massing and the density. I think you're almost there. You've made big improvements, and in terms of proposing this as a change to the existing neighborhood, perhaps a way to talk about it is to look further west on Vernon and bring in some comparisons with other multi-unit residential that cut a section through the building, through the topography, look at the relationship with the single-family residences. I think that I haven't gone through the neighborhood myself, but just taken a quick look on some aerials, and I think that may surprise some people in looking at how this could work. Still, the vehicular access, I think, that's your biggest hurdle. And when I think about the proposed, that the off-ramp from 100 southbound to Vernon, again, in the Grandview plan, is going to be eliminated as it exists now. Perhaps there's a way, if that is no longer a county road, to get a curb cut off of Vernon into this property and into some structured parking that goes underneath. That's a lot. More. That's a much longer-term view, I think. So you likely don't have the time for that, but wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Commissioner Scher, then Commissioner Forrest.
I cannot get past the density issue. It was raised by staff, and I noticed we have lots of comparative information of units per acre. If we look at high-density HDR, I think, 12 to 13 units per acre? 12 to 30, pardon me, misspoke. My own writing says 12 to 30. If I look at the units that are identified in the chart that was provided in our packet that are higher, nearly all of those, if memory serves, are much farther from individual residential properties than what we're looking at here. And that gives me really great pause for identifying something that has this kind of density. The map that still sits on your screen right now, those houses are very, very close to something that's going to look very, very big and have a lot of units and a lot of traffic. And to me, it's just the density. That's the problem. The density is driving every issue that we keep bringing up here. If the density were less, we could probably get around almost every one of those issues from traffic on.
Commissioner Forrest.
With the PSR designation, you can have more units and fewer parking spaces. So there's, probably more financial return potential for that reason. And thus more density. I'm also concerned about density. I also, in the narrative, it's referred to as an independent living facility for seniors. But the plan just doesn't look like a very comfortable independent living building. Because of the hillside, I don't see, right now, it is just a sketch plan, so I understand that things can change. I don't see an easy way for people to be dropped off and picked up out front, as was mentioned earlier. It's still very likely that there would be street parking, and I think that's an incredibly negative potential impact on the single-family homes in the area. You've added a through walkway between 49th and Vernon. It has steps. it's not walker or wheelchair friendly. Also, if somebody doesn't have a walker or wheelchair and yet stairs aren't comfortable for them, yet they really like to walk, which a lot of seniors do, it just doesn't seem like it's a comfortable building to enter and exit from for a lot of those individuals, even onto 49th Street, without going through a parking garage. And even just traffic coming in and having to turn around on those streets to go out again is going to impact the neighborhood. I was wondering also about the building features, what you're anticipating. Would it be a security building? What kind of staffing would you expect to have? Maybe you could address that.
It will be a secure building. I'll defer to Jim if I get anything wrong, but it will be an independent living facility, so we don't foresee any staff there, nor large kind of commercial deliveries or anything like that. It would be people living in an apartment of their own volition, so just coming and going via their own private vehicles.
I know some of the buildings, they have like a front desk area and a secure door, so they have somebody manning a desk and at the building and kind of being a resource. So I was just wondering if it was anticipated. Maybe it's just not at that point yet. I'm not sure.
We really aren't at that point yet, but there's likely no 24-hour staff. It's more like a day staff.
Commissioner Staunton?
So at the outset, I just want to make sure we're clear about, I didn't say that I thought 43 or 44 units an
Nope,
acre.
you didn't. You just said that was some of the highest density in town.
Okay.
I agree with you.
I kind of echo a lot of the comments here. I think for me as a planning commissioner, the toughest part is the very first step, which is being asked to modify the comprehensive plan. And Carrie, I'm not quite sure, in the staff memo it talked about the low-density attached residential being 1 to 4 units per acre, but in the chart inside, it looks like it's 4 to 8 units per acre.
Correct. Yes.
So it's 4 to 8?
Yes.
Which would make this, you've got about 1.25, even if you include the railroad right-of-way, that gets you to what, between 10 and 12 units for this site, and you're talking about 60. And I just, when I look at the site, it'd be different if, some of the other ones that are on here, I actually live kind of close to the ones on the far west side of this map that we've been talking about along Vernon. And, those are 18, 19, 24 units an acre, even 41. But to the west of there's a big ravine, and then there's a big hillside. And so there's a natural buffer. It's kind of the reverse of what you've got. If you had a hill on the north side and it was dropping down to Vernon, I'd feel really different about this, and it was entering from Vernon, my mind would open up more to the notion of changing from low density to high density. But with everything that is kind of downhill from this, it's just really hard for me to envision why we would want to change from low density to high density. And going to Commissioner Fisher's comment, I wonder about, if you could get 10, 11, 12 units in there, I don't know if it's townhomes or it's some kind of in-between, that I could see that being an interesting buffer for the folks that are across the street and around the neighborhood. They're saying, well, that feels kind of like single-family residential, even though it's a little more dense than your regular kind of house, and it probably provides them a buffer as well from any noise, et cetera, that's coming from Vernon Avenue. So, that's more what I could envision, and I just can't see the kind of density that you're talking about. And I know from past experience with our city council that they're going to want some good explanation. We're going to have some explaining to do about why we're going to increase the density.
Just to respond a little bit, we did do some exploration of the different zoning types and categories with the parcel sizes and what we could do. And if we did do all 3 parcels in a PSR 3, that would give us an allowable 16 units, and then if with bonuses we could get up to 26. If we did 2 parcels in a PSR 4, we could do 17 and 38. So there's a range across some of the different categories. So we'll take another look at that.
Other comments from the commission? I think that's the comments that we had. Don't mean to throw water on the fire here, but my judgment from the comments is that people still have some concerns about the massing and the density to the proposal. If there's some way to tone that down, it might be appropriate. Again, my view is you've got the topographical issue. You're on the wrong side of the hill here, and then added to the traffic concerns make this problematic. And I agree with Commissioner Staunton that given the experience, and I'm not saying good or bad, with the City Council, I think you'd have, even if at some point the Commission were to approve this kind of proposal, I think you'd have great difficulty with the City Council, and after having spent a lot of time and effort getting it to that point. So those are our comments. Please take them with in good faith. I think we're trying to give you our honest opinion about things, and I'm sure that the neighborhood would echo those things. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you taking the time.
Okay, next item, correspondence and petitions. I assume we received a council connection. I didn't see it in my packet. We did. We received the attendance sheet. Your chair is just barely hanging on here, but we're doing what we can. We have the City Council meeting minutes. Next item is Chair and Commission member comments. For the first item, I'd like to ask Commissioner Staunton if he could address the issue of Commission work plans.
Be happy to.
Thank you.
I had a chance to attend a meeting on Monday evening. The City Council and staff have been working to try to help commissions kind of think through annual work plans and think in terms of a little more structure about priorities and the things that we'd like to tackle each year. And I understand there was a meeting that Commissioner Platter attended earlier. There is going to be a meeting in the fall of the chairs or vice chairs of the various commissions with the council, where the council would like to see work plans for the coming year. And Commissioner Grable has informed me that he will not be available for that meeting, and in my role as the vice chair, that leaves me without a chair when the music stopped. No, but happy to do it. So I went to a meeting on Monday night, which was the assistant city manager, who invited the chairs and vice chairs of the various commissions to come in and just kind of get an overview about what staff was thinking. Given that Monday night was an absolutely beautiful evening, I happened to be the only one attending. But I felt good at least that she wasn't left there by herself. But I got some nice materials, both electronic and hard copy, and what I thought might be a good idea for us to do is to find some time in these next three agendas to talk about this in more detail. I know Carrie has copies of those, and with the chair's indulgence, I'd ask that we find the right meeting where it fits into the agenda and we can start talking. But the gist of it is that we ought to be thinking about You know, we do a lot of responding to applications that come in, and that's part of our job. But I think as a guest speaker at one of our joint meetings once said, they call us a planning commission because we're supposed to plan. And so there are some kind of legislative recommendations we should be thinking about and priorities, and we see a lot of things, and I'm sure we have a lot of ideas about what to tackle. And so if we could start thinking about that between now and when we can get this on the agenda, I think that would be a good thing. Yeah, Carrie, can you just circulate
We'll distribute
that all?
those.
I will. I'll distribute those to everybody. And I'm seeing within the next maybe couple of months, I'm not seeing a lot of development applications coming forward. As soon as I say that, we'll have a run on them. But I think this is a good time to tackle this.
Good, thank you. And thank you, Kevin, for attending that meeting for me. It was my wife's birthday, so I was, I'm not.
A lot of other people have birthdays. My pleasure.
Thank you. Commissioner Forrest.
You did the right thing. I guess to add on to that, I happened to catch the end of the I suppose about two-thirds of the city council meeting on the television today. I'm not sure exactly why my TV was on to that channel, but it happened to be on, so I had it going. And during council comments, the mayor also mentioned, he was asking about what do we really want to have done when people build on smaller city lots and how to address it, and was asking if the Planning Commission was doing anything with this or something. So I think that it's very timely what you said regarding that. So it is something we should think about, and I'm glad we may have some time coming up quickly. And I don't know if, Commissioner Fisher, are you going to share any more about the last night's meeting regarding France Avenue intersections? I attended. It was the first time I'd attended. I didn't go to the first one, and I was very impressed with the variety of constituents or stakeholders that were at that meeting, from health departments to our traffic people, and it's quite a diverse group, and I was really pleased.
Mr. Chair, I guess I can just add a few things, but I just showed up because we were invited as a planning commission, and I was actually really impressed. And when we talk about the transportation commission really changing their role into being the forward-thinking group, and it was a really good discussion. They had representatives of many agencies, from people interested in biking to county, MnDOT, all the people that would be interested in a corridor like France Avenue. And it's amazing how a corridor like France Avenue has a lot of constituents through the Twin Cities. But as some of you may know, there was at some point the proposal to build an overhead crossing on France, and when that didn't happen, the funding's out there, and the idea is to be able to invest that money in some better crossing opportunities, which then translated into looking at 3 key intersections. And what I wasn't aware of is that but it's really more of a longer range vision. So instead of just looking in a micro sense at these 3 intersections, the consultants in this group are really looking at how that can be the start of a transformation of France Avenue. And they propose some very interesting things about how the pedestrian realm can work, not only on the public side, but how we might incent it to happen on the private side, which leads right back to us, because this PUD tool we have, if we think about, and I'll just use a property like the Byerly's property that's very challenged on the public side in terms of what you can do, as we're working with developers that are doing their projects, if we have a vision for what France Avenue can be. And if you think about it, our biggest struggle is when we talk about where is the building and how is it facing the street, it kind of varies by project, and we don't have a single guidance to look at and say we need about this much space to do this. And I think what's happening in this process is ultimately we're going to have that idea of what that cross-section wants to look like. So when we can get that opportunity and we can negotiate with private property owners to help build this as we go, I think it's going to be really helpful. So there were Did I get that even close to right? Okay. About halfway through, I'm thinking I could just ask Chuck to come up and explain it quickly. But anyway, it seemed really exciting, and I think they're coming up with some good ideas, and I think we're going to start hearing a lot more about it. So I would encourage you, if there's another meeting where they're looking for input or just having us have a chance to engage, we should do it, because at the end of the day, it's going to come back to this commission to make sure we get those pieces done over the next many years. Yeah, there were some good ideas about reducing lane widths to the minimums, medians in the middle of France.
Road diets type stuff.
Yep, absolutely, all that complete streets kind of stuff. And I think probably the biggest point of discussion, Councilor Bennett was there, and she was just asking the question, should we be talking about bike lanes on France Avenue? Versus, could that, because every time you add something, so we take away some lanes to allow other amenities. You can use those for a number of things. By putting a bike lane, it's certainly an amenity, but her question is, shouldn't it just be on York, and then we can use that space for other things? And my feeling is that given where bicyclists want to go and other enhancements that are being made, I like the idea of the bike lanes because they provide the buffer. We talked a lot about when you're walking along France, that just doesn't feel good no matter what, because the cars are too close and going too fast. You reduce the lane widths, that helps, because I think it helps the behavior of the drivers. By putting that on a lot of streets, you can overcome that by having parking lanes. So cars are parked, it provides that buffer. We can't have that on France, but if you have a bike lane with landscape and other things, it can do the same thing, and you get a double reward, because now not only did you create the buffer for pedestrians, but you created a bike lane. So anyway, they had a number of options, and that process is going to do its thing, and they're going to come to some resolution. But I favored the one with the bike lanes. I think that actually would be a good outcome on France long term.
Thank you. I realize it's late. We don't normally go this late. I appreciate the city staff for sticking with us. I do want to bring up one final topic, and that concerns materials that were in our packet concerning a building at 5427 Woodcrest. And Carrie may have some comments on this as well. It's a situation where a new house was built. It was built so close to the property line. A couple issues, and you can see them from the pictures. One issue is it's so close to the property line, because of the topography, the people have to go outside their property to get their own backyard, which is kind of silly. And then they built this huge retaining wall along the side. And the first two pictures you look at, it doesn't look so bad, but then you get to the third picture, and you see this woman who's apparently the neighbor tending her side of the garden, and you think, goodness sakes, the retaining wall is 6 feet high at that point. And on top of the retaining wall is this huge house. And it calls to mind a project that was undertaken at the last meeting on Sunny Slope. I was not here, but there was a proposal to redevelop a property there previously owned by the Moody's. And what I think was not really presented well on that property was the original proposal had the driveway going up and a side entrance to the garage. And the car turnaround had a 5 or 6 foot retaining wall right on the property line next to the house next door. And in that case, the neighbor talked to her neighbors, and I understand that when the project went to the city council, the developer and the owner decided to change the configuration of that home so that the garage was front entrance, so they didn't have the big 5 foot retaining wall right next to the neighbor. And I think, Carrie, correct me, I think the council has expressed some interest in that topic. What do we do about proposals to redevelop a lot such that there's no access to the backyard without trespassing on the neighbor's property? And what do we do about huge retaining walls? It's just not a very friendly kind of way to treat your neighbors. Commissioner Staunton?
If I can just chime in with one more thing, I believe that the gentleman who brought this to our attention at the last meeting that you were not able to attend is here tonight, and so I want to thank him for bringing that up. And I guess I'm interested. I read the memo as well, but I'm not quite sure. I hear, my understanding from the memo is that there's a technical compliance with this 1 foot deal, but because the topography is so severe, it creates this scenario. Is there, I mean, I guess what I don't understand is, was there a failure to comply with some provision of our code, or is this permitted?
Yeah, this is permitted. Part of it, this is on the creek, and they wanted to create a walkway path with a patio that faces the creek. And so that was part of the reasoning behind that. It does comply with our code. We don't have setback requirements for retaining walls. It complied with that 1 foot rule from the previous house. So the plan is code compliant. It was reviewed by our engineering department, who always reviews these grading and drainage plans as part of a building permit, and was approved.
So is it more dramatic because it's built right to the setback line, the house? And so if that picture the chair was pointing to is because the house is just on the other side?
Correct. Yeah, it's right on the lot line. And that brings up the other plan that I laid before you this evening on a 50-foot lot up on Morningside Road, where another retaining wall was built right to the lot line. And in that case, that property owner can't access their backyard from the front yard without climbing down a 3-foot tall retaining wall. They would have to encroach on the neighbor's property.
Tell me that's not the one we granted the variance on.
We did a lot division. The house could have been bigger had you not shifted that lot line to actually make the lot smaller. It was just a shift of the rear lot line. There was no variance granted, no.
Oh, it's not the one at the corner of Grimes and Morningside, which is bad enough.
So the council did express some concern about it at their last meeting. I've since tried to bump up our work session with the council. Right now we're kind of penciled in the September range. But I think what we want to do is, I guess first we could consider, do we want to regulate those kind of things? How, I'm not sure. Do you require access from the front to the back? Do you have to have a pedestrian way? I'm not sure what that might look like, but that's something that we can consider. We should probably have the engineering department involved with it, since they're the ones that are reviewing these things. We also, in regard to the 50-foot lot regulations, we also had some concerns brought from a couple of builders to a couple of city council members that would like us to also revisit the height issue in terms of the maximum height to a ridge line. And might we want to consider allowing an exception if a builder reduces that ridge line down in a way to create better design, maybe allow them to go out. We've got that
Give us an example that you explain a little more. I'm having trouble envisioning it.
Yeah, I should have brought pictures.
Maybe next time.
Yeah. So I guess what I'd like to do is put this on our agenda for either the next meeting or the meeting after, where we can tackle all of this issue. It ties in too with our medium lot. We're considering the 50-foot lots and subdivisions. Do we want to require the medians for lots smaller than 9,000 square feet? Have that median average across the board. I think that's something the council was interested in too. So I think what I'd like to do is put that on a future agenda, and we tackle all these issues, that we provide some background, and I can show you some examples. So what they're thinking about is our ridgeline height maximum. We've got the 35-foot on a 50-foot wide lot. Say a builder builds something and it goes to 30 feet or 25 feet. They don't max it out. Could we allow them to do a more colonial style house where the setback on the ground stays the same, but we relax the standard where you have to step the house in 6 inches for every foot. Might we allow an exception? So that's something they'd like us to consider as well.
Commissioner Fisher?
Mr. Chair, Carrie, I'm just curious, we don't have regulations right now about, I mean, right now you can build a retaining wall right to the property line, but don't we have a regulation that says you can't dump rainwater from your site onto your neighbor's site? I mean, you have to keep your own stormwater on your property, right?
Right.
And yet I'm looking at a retaining wall that's essentially a sloping bouldered wall that's taking all of the water, rainwater that's falling and dumping it directly on their neighbor's property. So from an engineering perspective, if we're looking at this, that does not meet our current rules. And so I think sometimes it's how we look at what our rules are, and, you know, I think that's the impact here. Now, obviously, it's a humongous retaining wall, and there are other issues that we should look at. But I think we have rules right now that we're not regulating.
Thank you. Other comments of the commission? Other staff comments? Again, thank you to city staff for sticking with us for so long, and thank you to the other members of the commission for doing so. Is there any other business to come before the commission? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nobody's opposed. We are adjourned.